Chapter 181. Nancy was well aware of his commercial value, so he cherished his reputation even more. The endorsements he accepted were, in fact, very few, and he strictly judged their value and influence. Moreover, the most important thing was that he never aimed to make money. All his actions were solely to enhance his reputation. Some people, with the prestige brought by their strength, could protect a part of the world. Nancy's strength wasn't at that level, but he could achieve protection through his celebrity status, safeguarding the world he had lived in from pollution and collapse. In the increasingly dangerous present world, a world without any background would only struggle more and more to survive. Su Qi hesitated. "You mean to say that our friendship doesn't count?" Nancy twitched the corner of his mouth. "We don't have any damn friendship. It's just that the feelings have faded." Su Qi shook his head. "I clearly co-hosted with you. Partnering up, we were colleagues. You're a contestant. Have the nerve to call that being colleagues." When the past was brought up again, Nancy, gripping his knife and fork, barely kept his composure. After the last program ended, he swore he'd blacklist Su Qi, never to participate in Playhaven again. Well, the female assistant, seeing this scene, quickly coughed to give her boss a way out. "Mr. Nancy, sir. Many people are still waiting for you." This time, Nancy realized he had almost lost his composure, gritted his teeth slowly, and put down his knife and fork. "Enough, I won't talk to you anymore." His usually adept talking couldn't cope with this guy who played by no known rules. "You should just go back to where you came from. I still have events and schedules, and I have to host at Stars Hall tomorrow, very busy." Su Qi. "So, will there be interaction with the audience then?" "It has nothing to do with you." Nancy's eyelids twitched. "Because there really was." Anyway, Nancy always felt that staying any longer might be ominous. So he stood up. "Buxian, till we meet again." "Okay, see you tomorrow." Nancy always felt uneasy about that phrase. Still, even if the other party entered later, he would only be in the rear area. He couldn't step into the privilege area, let alone the VIP area. "Then see you tomorrow." After he stood up, other dignitaries swarmed towards him, surrounding him. Su Qi scooped up a spoon of dessert. He looked at the female assistant beside him. "Aren't you going with them?" She shook her head, but answered off-topic. "Money, power, status." The assistant softly said, "Mr. Nancy has seen too much of that. He generally isn't moved by it, nor would he agree easily to such matters. But still, personally accepting your business card is indeed Mr. Nancy's recognition of you." Recognition? Hardly necessary. And not moved? That didn't exist. However, instead of arguing, Su Qi looked at the female assistant. "By the way, do you like Nancy?" The assistant was still speaking, but her eyes suddenly widened. She stammered, Wait, what are you talking about?" The switch was too quick for her to react. And where did it even come from? "No need to hide. I've worked at both matchmaking agencies and blind date corners. I am quite insightful about love. Are you some kind of matchmaker? Additionally, I'm not hiding anything. How could I possibly like my boss?" The assistant gathered her composure and explained. "I'm professional, I won't be wrong," Su Qi said indifferently. "I once helped 32 pairs of nearly couples. Were you successful in matching them?" "No, I successfully split them all." "Oh?" The assistant incredulously widened her eyes. "That's professional? All I broke were losers or flirts. Of course, I've made many successful matches too. I can tell at a glance, and you naturally can't hide it. When I was testing my abilities, I went to the blind date corner. Nearly got surrounded by people, so I moved to the matchmaking agency. I must say I made some contributions to human happiness." "So what are you trying to say?" The assistant's voice sank. Her expression towards Su Qi was a bit wary, her tone slightly stern. "Or are you trying to use this somehow?" She didn't expect her thoughts to be seen through. But so what if the other party wanted to use this against Mr. Nancy? She could only say no way. "I'm not a bad person." Su Qi's smile was harmless. "I was only proving my professionalism, and taking the opportunity to remind you." He looked at Nancy's figure. It seems that guy has taken a liking to you too. The assistant shivered, a bit flustered. You don't talk nonsense. I can explain the analysis details to you, and could even teach you the confirmation methods, though it might take several minutes, Su Chi muttered. But it might be inconvenient for you, given both of you are really busy. If not, then forget it. The female assistant slammed her hand down on the table. Forget it. Tell me. Su Chi smiled. 5 minutes later, the female assistant left, her heart shaken and her steps unsteady. Watching her retreating figure, Su Chi muttered, See, people in love are just irrational, even unaware that their data has been breached. There's quite a lot of content. Su Chi looked at the event itinerary and information he had extracted through his Super Dream Protocol from her device. Using Super Dream Protocol was time-consuming, and if the woman glanced at her watch, she might notice. So Su Chi had chosen a topic that would make the biggest impact on the assistant. The effect was indeed good. After all, everyone has their vulnerabilities or weak spots, and having that information meant he had the advantage. However, he didn't really lie. It was just that the two had different statuses, and their feelings were a bit awkward. If it could work out, both would have to bow to him. Su Chi continued browsing. So many guests from different worlds? The so-called fantasy universe is indeed rich and colorful. Preparing so many opening programs, can Nancy handle it all by himself? There are quite a few auction items, but none caught my eye. And the Spirit Prince's heir. Will he attend? Su Chi glanced over these points, then suddenly paused, his gaze stopping on something. Wait, this piano, why does it look familiar? At that moment, Sigong Cheng's incredulous voice sounded beside him. You really got in touch with Mr. Nancy? He looked at Su Chi, astonished. I saw him personally take your business card. Many were shocked. How did you manage it? Su Chi closed the panel. How did I manage it? I've told you we're acquainted. Once, he nearly had a mishap during a live show, and I stepped in, turned the situation around, and helped him keep control. Really? Sigong Cheng's eyes widened in shock. It couldn't be truer. If you don't believe me, you can ask him next time. Nancy? Su Chi paused. Also, there's good news. Sigong Cheng blinked. What? Nancy has already agreed to become a spokesman for the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce. When did that happen? Sigong Cheng's eyes widened. He hadn't seen the two signing any contract, and their conversation wasn't long. Probably right after Stars Hall opens tomorrow. Sigong Cheng? His veins were throbbing with excitement. It seemed impossible, considering a spokesman and Stars Hall advertising were completely different. All the elite knew they couldn't get Nancy to endorse their products, so they resorted to using Stars Hall for ads. At most, they would use holographic scrolling advertisements when Stars Hall was about to close. To have Nancy personally endorse it, considering their Night City connections, it was impossible. Sigong Cheng sighed. Ah, if only he could represent the products of Life Group, the continuous losses, including the whole situation, would surely change completely. Unfortunately, it was too difficult. Who's endorsing those things? Su Chi patted his shoulder and said, You just remember, set up the sanitation in a legal land tomorrow, put up the banner of the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce, have the factory ready at any time, wait for my word, and after Stars Hall closes, the rest is all up to you and Simon. Chapter 182 Nancy. What a sin! Stars Hall on that day. It was also the last day for many players to visit the replica city, Night City. Night City was teeming with people, with all kinds of visitors pouring in from all directions to step into the magnificent Stars Hall, where holographic technology, welcome speeches, electricity that didn't cost a dime, and a plethora of advertisements flooded every corner of Night City. A large number of personnel were entering Stars Hall. The assistant was doing Nancy's makeup, arranging his clothes, and making all the preparations for the opening. Nancy, recalling everything calmly, didn't feel nervous. but he did look at his assistant with some curiosity. "Say, why have you been looking down all day?" The assistant replied, "Last night, I didn't sleep well. Got a stiff neck." This was a lie. She hadn't slept all night because of the details and analysis Su Chi had mentioned, which had been circling in her head. She couldn't possibly say that she had been kept up all night thinking about it. Could she? Nancy glanced slightly at the holographic surveillance screen in the office, where a large number of Stars Hall staff were bustling about. There really are a lot of people. There were many guests from various circles, as this auction event amounted to a grand annual celebration of this domain, and Night City was just the selected host city. However, even so, Night City had also put all its effort, mustered all its strength, and devoted itself to serving guests from all circles. These dignitaries were indeed willing to spend lavishly, naturally spending all their money in the VIP and distinguished guests areas. But many dignitaries considered it worthwhile, as this domain contained too many big and small worlds. Although it was just the tip of the iceberg in the truly vast chaos, or even equivalent to a galaxy within the entire universe, for Night City it was already enough. "We cannot afford a single mistake today," Nancy said softly. "There are already about a dozen or so Spirit Prince's heirs that have arrived at the scene. These dozen or so were relatives of the Spirit King, akin to descendants of the great Spirit King family. Although it didn't sound like much, anyone related to the Spirit King was someone Nancy needed to treat cautiously. Don't underestimate distant nephews as relatives. Additionally, the itinerary of a few Spirit Prince's heirs seemed a bit slower, so they were expected to arrive a bit later. Their identities appeared to be even more significant. That was why Night City had arranged such a long program lineup. "It's about time, Mr. Nancy," said the person in charge softly. "The opening will begin in 5 minutes." "Okay." As the host, Nancy naturally had to go to the staging area beforehand. Stars Hall was now crowded with people, but it was distinctly organized. There was no chaotic noise, and it didn't seem crowded. Night City had even significantly reduced the noise between different regions. Even if there were loud shouts in the rear areas, at least they wouldn't bother the VIP section. And after all, with holographic images projected in every corner, there was no need to worry about myopic guests not being able to see the central platform. It really is perfection, but that's good. At least there won't be any trouble. Nancy heard about the incident in illegal land from those dignitaries yesterday. They had said Night City had successfully eliminated the Black Emperor and Giles crowd, 2 major gangs, and it was now under their jurisdiction. The specifics weren't clearly disclosed, as if deliberately avoiding the topic. He didn't bother to ask more. "It's time for the opening, Mr. Nancy." Nancy nodded. He collected his thoughts. Then, revealing a professional smile, dressed in a sumptuous tailcoat, he stood up straight, exuding confidence as he strode out. He entered the stage like a beam of light that captivated everyone's attention. Music, lights, the whole Stars Hall was sparkling. "Ladies and gentlemen," Nancy's voice reached everyone's ears. "Welcome to Night City. Welcome to this world auction of celebration. I am today's host, Nancy." He was surrounded by many spotlights. The applause of the audience also followed. The burning sensation in the air made every cell in his body jump. Exactly. This was the feeling, everything progressing step by step. All in his control. Next, let us first welcome the important guests who have come to Night City. Nancy first introduced the other Spirit Princes and the presences of other powers. They all sat in the foremost and top seats, having individual private areas, so there was no need for detailed introductions. Merely a welcome speech according to their power. These dozen or so Spirit Princes were people of Phantom Dream Spirit King and Death Omen Star Spirit King, both of whom had formed vast families, with the latter even being a power centered around heirs. Then there were some other organizations who, although they didn't compare to the Spirit King, were still behemoths to Night City. Finally, it was time to introduce the organizers of Stars Hall, the 5 investors of Night City who contributed the most to its construction. Their strength and value in Night City were undoubtedly top-notch, and this was also their method of making their reputations known. Galaxy Logistics. New Evolution Group. Nancy looked at the holographic panel and read off each name. After all, as the organizer, this was the normal procedure. And the seats of the 5 organizers were also separately placed at the front, located in an area like judges' seats, of course, also near the Spirit Princess positions. Above each person's seat, there were holographic logos and advertisements for the groups. After announcing one, the dignitary would rise with the chair. It could be said that they had exhausted all means to climb up in status. Wisdom Group. My Group. Chapter 183. Nancy continued reciting until he reached the final name. Also, the Hustlers. He suddenly choked, his pupils slightly constricting, disbelief evident in his eyes. What the hell? Why do these characters look so familiar? The Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce? Nancy was utterly shocked. Wasn't this that guy's joke-level Chamber of Commerce? That crude business card was still in his pocket. How could these characters now appear on the organizer list? Nancy didn't have time to think, as thousands of eyes were fixed on him, confirming that he hadn't seen wrong. He took a deep breath. And the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce. Thanks to these 5 organizers for their support. Nancy looked towards the distant VIP area, the last seat, slowly displaying the logo of the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce, a design that, upon closer inspection, was recognized as the character for Idol. Simultaneously appearing in Nancy's line of sight was Su Chi, who slowly emerged along with the rising seat. Damn it! Nancy felt a lump in his chest, and he even saw Su Buxian waving and smiling at him, and giving him a thumbs-up gesture. Thumbs up my ass. The most crucial part. The organizers even had a microphone, ready for a short speech at the end of the event schedule, before the auction would start. This was also an opportunity for the 5 elite figures to advertise and court various powers. As long as they captured even one person's attention, it would be enough. Anyway, it was bad. Really bad now. Nancy's scalp tingled, and he began to sweat profusely. This guy showing up in the front row was one thing, but being one of the organizers, and now he even had a microphone. What a disaster. With trembling hands, Nancy picked up the microphone. In any case, this is not only an auction but also a celebration where guests from all walks gather. Before the auction commences, please enjoy the upcoming fabulous shows. Without any hesitation, he hastily exited the stage, letting the show temporarily cover for him. The person in charge stood there, dumbfounded, watching Nancy stride over. Mr. Nancy, you seem to have left the stage about a minute earlier than scheduled. Don't remind me. Nancy's eyes were intensely solemn. First tell me, what's the deal with the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce? How did he become one of the organizers? The person in charge coughed. It was a last-minute notification. Originally that spot was supposed to be for Life Group and that Sigongchong. After all, although they've declined significantly, the funds invested previously ensured Life Group owned this seat. Then, this morning, there was a last-minute notification. It was changed to the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce. Other elites saw that Life Group didn't show up at such an event, and even transferred the spot to this unknown chamber, naturally feeling it was a good opportunity, and they agreed. I'm not asking about that, Nancy said slowly and earnestly. I'm asking why Life Group would transfer this seat to that guy. This seat was coveted by the elites, both in terms of value and opportunity, naturally very important to their own interests. The person in charge stammered, I don't know either. I just know Life Group moved into illegal land, which seems to be where the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce originated. Nancy's expression subtly darkened, and after a few seconds of contemplation, he decided to leave the place directly and find his assistant. Mr. Nancy. The person in charge couldn't call him back. Meanwhile, the assistant lady was inspecting various auction items in the lower area, which were very important, and she was personally responsible for them. Yet she saw the approaching Nancy and was slightly startled. Boss Nancy? Shouldn't you be in the waiting area? How did you end up here? Seeing the hurrying Nancy, she suddenly realized something. That, if you need a toilet, it's over there. Nancy shook his head. Help me check something. The elites of Night City lied. Investigate illegal land. About the real situation of the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce. He felt an odd sense of crisis. In fact, this feeling had always been present, its source unknown, possibly related to him, or possibly to the Spirit Prince's heir. In any case, it seemed something big was about to happen that would decide his career. After seeing Su Buxian, this feeling grew particularly strong. Therefore, he needed to gather enough information to face the unknown situation, or to use as leverage in making his decision. Elsewhere, in another area, Sigong Chang and Simon sat together, but they were not in the VIP section. Instead, they were in the ordinary area. Simon muttered, "I didn't expect that the president would actually persuade you to give up your seat." He looked towards Sigong Chang. "You wouldn't happen to be holding any secrets, like an affair or a crime, that the president might be using against you?" Sigong Chang, "My actions are transparent and honorable. I wouldn't have such filthy secrets. Besides, I like investing." He glanced over at Su Buxian, who briefly appeared on the holographic screen. Sigong Chang's support for the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce was motivated by his daughter's illness. But that didn't mean he would support them unconditionally and hand over all benefits. The fact that he could enter illegal land and announce the official start of the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce was already the utmost he could do. He had initially wanted to take this opportunity at Stars Hall to revive and rejuvenate Life Group. But that guy had successfully persuaded him. Taking part in this gigantic gamble, I wonder whether the outcome will prove to be right or wrong. Simon was confused as he silently gazed into the distance at Su Buxian. But it didn't matter. After all, whatever the president intended to do, he would support him unconditionally. Reputation plus 100. Su Qi's eyelid twitched slightly. Where did this 100 come from? Large increments in reputation usually indicated a powerful person or deep reverence. Had the followers of the Hustlers sect increased? He had also gained some scattered reputation by just making an appearance, though the amount wasn't large. It was because he hadn't yet made a deep impression. Like watching an advertisement. Without repeated, brainwashing slogans, who would remember? He checked his current progress. Title: Sect Hierarch of the Hustlers, 75238/100000. Current level LV2. Emerging. Not bad, he had gained nearly 40,000 more since the last time. Besides the over 10,000 outside of Night City, the rest of the reputation had accumulated naturally over time. He wondered who had contributed this boost. But indeed, I need to pay attention, Su Qi muttered to himself. According to the information gathered from Left Hand's group, reputation is not just about boosting capabilities. There are also important elements like totems, shrines, and followers. He knew about shrines. Whether it was the gods or the 7 spirit kings, powerful beings likely all possessed them, used to provide sanctuary to the world and deter pollution. It also served as a way to increase followers. Of course, it was the opposite for Evil God. His shrine was in the form of a sheep head, primarily aimed to pollute the world and create chaos. However, this was all because these dreadful beings possessed the power of dreadful dominance and reputation, enabling such actions. Ordinary weaklings should probably start with what's known as a totem, like those engraved on an amulet. Not a fixed object. As long as the strength could be projected within it, it could be utilized, though at most it could slightly alter house feng shui and provide sanctuary for individuals. For example, a well-known old monk's blessed jade bracelet within 10 villages. It contained the monk's strength, which didn't necessarily come from physical power, but rather from the accumulated power of faith over time. Could help you purify pollution. Other ordinary players actually didn't value reputation much, thinking that title capabilities were merely auxiliary and fame was hard to achieve. But the big clubs nurtured various emerging talents, aiming to make a name from various instances, and it wasn't just for the sake of title capabilities. At this moment, the first show had concluded. Mr. Nancy walked out briskly, appearing less confident and more uneasy compared to the opening. Though his professionalism was still spot on, invisible to others. Only Su Chi could notice, because there were question marks hovering over Mr. Nancy's head. Now, he is panicking. Chapter 184. The arrival of the young Master Spirit King. Nonsense. Could Nancy not panic? Just as she had sent her assistant to investigate, she received news that 3 Spirit Prince's heirs would arrive in about half an hour. Moreover, their identities had been confirmed. These 3 were direct descendants of the Spirit King with extremely high status. They were beyond comparison to any of the Spirit King family members present. And each of them was different. One was capricious, another bizarre and odd, and the last cold and indifferent. In short, trouble and not a single normal one among them. And Nancy's eyelid twitched as she looked at Su Chi sitting in the organizer's seat. There was also Su Buxian, a ticking time bomb. This guy was weak and lacked any backing, but he didn't act like a normal person. In the last show, he had even challenged a priest. It was because of Su Chi's unconventional nature that he kept a respectful distance. What a hellish start. Nancy's trigeminal nerve was in pain. The guy should know the weight of being a Spirit Prince's heir, right? He wouldn't cause trouble, would he? This guy, he's smiling at me. Looks pretty harmonious and well-behaved. Did I laugh a bit too loudly yesterday? Nancy hesitated for a few seconds, then continued hosting the next event. In any case, just wait and see. Time passed minute by minute. The celebration continued enthusiastically, and everything was proceeding perfectly normally. Night City's event was unlike any ordinary soiree. To satisfy guests from all walks of life, in conjunction with holographics, prosthetics, and technology, a dazzling array of technical splendor was showcased, making everyone feel as if they were immersed in the experience. Fantasy universe indeed had substance to it. Su Chi looked at the blueprints and models in the Super Dream Protocol. The blueprint details are pretty much there, and the Super Dream subsystem should also be built. The Super Dream Protocol was an intelligent system that could continuously absorb, process, and analyze data, but the most important point was, it was linked to one's spiritual power. In other words, the higher Su Chi's spiritual power was, the stronger its processing and analytical abilities would become. So, Su Chi studied for a while and found that he could leave a subsystem in Night City. It's akin to an electronic shrine. Although it was uncertain if he could still connect after leaving the instance, the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce and the Hustlers sect needed to expand, develop, and grow stronger, so it was essential to build an exchange system. Additionally, because the Super Dream Protocol was linked to his spiritual power, he could allow the system to intelligently allocate a portion of it to use the concrete ability to construct models. Existing EMT information, the entirety of Life Group's core data, and Adam Hammer's modified machinery technology were continuously fed by Su Chi into the Super Dream Protocol. The good news: could now fully replicate EMT, copy the blueprint models of Adam Hammer. This indirectly showed that given time and extensive data, the Super Dream Protocol could master many technological blueprints, bypassing others' technological barriers. The bad news: once Night City's elite realized this, they would undoubtedly go to war, collectively attack the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce. For them, having their in-house developed technology controlled directly by another was a matter of life and death. More good news: Su Chi could continuously integrate various elements, deriving all sorts of patchwork products. Even better news: he sewed them all, laying the foundation for the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce's signature products, and what followed was depending on Simon and Sigong Cheng's execution, which was why Sigong Cheng had passed this position over to him. Investing was risky, but if one saw a thing of unlimited potential, naturally Sigong Cheng understood what choices to make. However, what Su Chi miscalculated was that Sigong Cheng's real all-in bet was not only on the product but also on Su Chi himself. Su Chi looked at the stage, smiling faintly. Now, all that's missing is Nancy as the spokesperson. Nancy shivered. His gaze fell on Su Chi, whose smile gave him an uneasy feeling. It was like having the sensation of being stalked by human traffickers in the street, about to be bundled into a car at any moment. But it's not that simple. In Su Chi's mind, There were at least 9 ways to make Nancy loudly recite the advertisements of the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce here in Stars Hall. His weaknesses being the Spirit Prince's heirs and his career. But using leverage to threaten was ultimately a last resort. These methods had major flaws. Once used, they could have a temporary advertising effect, but would also cause Nancy to completely veer away from this connection. Su Chi's real aim was to make Nancy the spokesperson of the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce. In simple terms, that was to firmly bind him to this thief ship Ba, this dream ship that had yet to set sail amidst the raging waves. However, such things were never easy. After all, Sigong Chang and Nancy were different. Nancy's position was complicated, having seen too many chips and interests, and what he truly wanted, Su Chi did not yet know. Just a chance is needed, and at that moment, the largest holographic screen in the center of Stars Hall began flashing suddenly, and although it was brief, many still noticed it. Then, to prove that it wasn't an illusion just now, the holographic screen started flashing continuously, and the music and background noise were also intermittently affected. What's going on? The person in charge was sweating bullets, his eyes wide open as he urgently inquired. He was under more pressure than Nancy. If nothing went wrong, he'd sweat through his entire outfit. Chapter 185. There was trouble. He would have bled profusely, cut into pieces and recycled in a dump site. Still checking. There are unknown energy fluctuations causing ripples that destabilize the current. Then, the holographic screens scattered throughout the Stars Hall also flickered, as did everyone's wrist projections. The crowd was stunned. What's going on? Was there an accident? Or is it part of the show? Nancy and Su Chi's eyes slightly narrowed as they both looked up towards the high dome of the Stars Hall. Nancy sensed the presence. His strength was only 7th rank, but he was still the most powerful being present, surpassing even the Spirit Prince's descendants. However, he still had to nod and bow, not daring to slack in the slightest. After all, strength? Strength was useless. In the grand scheme, power and one's background mattered. Meanwhile, Su Chi had looked up because he saw a question mark. Strength is opening a spatial portal, causing ripples. It's the arrival of some of the Spirit Prince's heirs. Without any hesitation, Nancy immediately informed the backstage. He also signaled for the program to pause. All holographic screens in the Stars Hall transformed, displaying grand and majestic scenes to everyone. Above the Stars Hall, rune pathways were constantly forming. The next moment, a figure slowly stepped out from the portal, its body covered in black runes, tall, filled with an abnormal and eerie presence. Yet its eyes held a scrutinous gaze. It looked around. Seems I'm the first? The crowd fell silent. Nancy took a deep breath. Let us welcome the young Master Yuhai Spirit King. The elites and visitors of various realms also wore a look of reverence, standing up, applauding, while those from powerful factions and the Spirit Prince's descendants, squinting, didn't move, but their expressions held a hint of fear. Though backed by Spirit Kings, they couldn't compare with these direct descendants. Afterwards, 2 more rune pathways materialized. Space ripples fluctuated. 2 figures also stepped out of the portal. One dressed in white clothes, wearing a light smile, but the look in his eyes was chilling. The other was a youth with an expressionless face, observing everything calmly. Young Master Yuhai narrowed his eyes huskily. Looks like you two are a step behind me. The calm youth tossed a pouch exuding energy. I accept my loss. The white-clothed young master showed a strange smile as his teeth clicked. You can take it, but, unlike him, there aren't many who've taken things from me and ended well. Young Master Yuhai's eyes eyed him dangerously, a menacing aura swirling. We'll see about that. Nancy swallowed. He could feel a strong tension between the 3, the most problematic situation he foresaw. See, I told you straight from hell. But he could only face it head-on. He forced a smile, shouting, Let us welcome the young masters of Sunset Spirit King and Ash Spirit King. Many elites immediately began to applaud, and music also started to play. It's quite crowded, but seems a bit too noisy. The white-clothed young Master Ash said with a soft laugh. And, who among us three are you welcoming? The audience felt his laughter eerie, sending chills down their spines. A dignitary from Night City gingerly, obsequiously smiled. Well, welcome to all. Ha! Young Master Ash, a chain glinting like cold light on his body, flew swiftly and pierced right through his shoulder, laughing. Sorry, I can only answer one question. The noble's expression was one of terror and pain as he still thought of speaking out to make an impression on the other. But unexpectedly, the other acted so abruptly. Why speak at all? Of course it's you. Esteemed sir, this obese noble, his prosthetic pierced yet also fused with flesh, chuckled nervously for the sake of his life. Young Master Ash grinned. It seems you don't welcome the other two. Do you? The noble's eyes widened in shock. Were there more explosions waiting in the chain? He sweated profusely, his face streaming as he muttered, "This?" But he dared not speak, as any answer would be pushing himself further into the fire pit. So hesitant? Young Master Ash shook his head with a smile. It seems you were lying to me just now. The noble was terrified, shaking in his boots, and he quickly blurted out, "Sir, I wasn't lying. It's just..." But he couldn't finish his sentence. The chains of Ash Spirit King, like blood vessels, suddenly burst open, and the noble was brutally flung away, his shoulder exploding into a large hole, and he fell unconscious to the ground. He murmured softly, "Insincere answers. I despise such people the most." Countless people watched, dumbfounded and fearful, at this scene. A powerful noble of Night City, a chairman with a vast economic empire, couldn't even fart in front of the adversary and was gravely injured. And the reason was utterly absurd. Nancy held the microphone, her palms sweating. This person was that capricious entity, cruel and merciless, a killer across many worlds. Yet no one dared to defy him. Damn it. Nancy couldn't even smooth things over. He was merely a somewhat famous lackey in the eyes of the other. Boring antics. Young Master Sunset and Xinghe calmly remarked as he settled into his seat, uninterested in these affairs. That's quite a vile taste, chuckled young Master Dark Sea, who also indulged in killings to vent, straightforward and direct, not disgusting like this person. Young Master Ash smiled and casually walked back to his seat. The three true heirs of the Spirit Kings made their formal entrance. Nancy took a deep breath and smiled. Then, to welcome our distinguished young lords, a new program will now begin. Please enjoy. Continuing the paused program was not an option. Night City now had to bring out the extravagant spectacle prepared for the lords to divert attention. Ironically, that noble had put quite an effort into this luxurious event. So these are the heirs of the Spirit King? Quite an entrance indeed. Su Chi mused to himself. The power of these three young lords wasn't much different from that of Nancy's. All were 7th rank. The void passage they used was opened with spiritual power runes. Nothing special. Moreover, they seemed to have bodyguards hidden around them, and their bodies were protected by the power of totems ready to defend them. If young Master Ash lost these protections, he would have been chopped into chips long ago. Relying on the background of the Spirit King and their status as young lords, they can kill in front of countless people, indicative of how terrifying their authority is. Su Chi observed everyone's expressions. And probably countless worlds are also under the protection of the 7 Spirit Kings' shrine, making people scared and reverent, not daring to be angry nor to speak. What's called protection is, to speak harshly, similar to collecting protection money together with the Black Emperor and Giles crowd, paying immense amounts of sky gold to secure the right to live. After all, not cooperating would result in pollution invasion and falling into destruction. Well, all trail back to the evil god. With his power alone, evil god causes the hearts of those in the present world to panic, destruction and death spread like a plague. Su Chi shook his head. Such a sin. At the moment he glanced toward Nancy. That guy now looked calm, But inside he was extremely nervous because he had totally lost control of the proceedings and didn't dare to speak rashly. With the 3 Spirit King heirs causing such a commotion upon their arrival, who knew what unexpected events could happen next? However, though the 3 heirs of the Spirit King currently focused on the holographic stage, the splendid spectacle, their auras were dangerously swirling undercurrents. What do you think? Nothing but boring falsities. How about we have a chat then? I recently heard something interesting. Dark Sea Young Master hoarsely laughed, looking at Ash Young Master. I heard that not long ago, one of your territories in Lin Yuan land got wiped out, right? As soon as these words came out, Ash Young Master's dangerous aura suddenly shifted. Then his eyes narrowed with a smiling gleam. What are you trying to say? Chapter 186. Why is everyone looking for me? What are you trying to say? Young Master Yuhai was unfazed by the dangerous aura of the other. His fingers tapped on the armrest of his seat. He let out a ghostly, strange chuckle. There's nothing much. Just didn't expect someone as ruthless and known for tormenting and intimidating countless as young Master Ash would dare to slap your face. With the existence of such an enormous entity as the 7 Spirit Kings, usually, it's like well water not mixing with river water, but in reality, there's also considerable friction among the powers below. These heirs of the Spirit Kings are even more eager and competitive, constantly clashing with one another in secret. In the present world, as the abyss power surged, the divine beings recovered, and under the influence of certain rules, there were tumultuous changes happening all the time. The bigger the waves, the more expensive the fish. That saying could also be applied here. The more chaotic the present world is, the more opportunities for eruptions. A great number of worlds were producing new people of the present with infinite potential. Some struggled in collapsing worlds, carving a bloody path from dark corners. Some resided in pollution, embracing the abyss power, turning vicious. Infinite worlds, infinite possibilities. Even though they have the backing of the Spirit Kings and endless resources, appearing as the elites of their generation on the surface. But the weight of the words, rising in times of chaos, could be enough to leave traces that crush the wheels in any world, in any era. Don't speak so unpleasantly. However, young Master Ash was not infuriated, merely smiling gently. Slapping my face? It's just an ant stirring up dust. I've said before, once I find him, I will naturally turn him into my collectible. Is that so? But young Master Yuhai spoke softly. It seems you don't yet know where the other party is. You could ask me for help, after all, as long as I wish it. There is no information or intelligence that I can't find. Young Master Ash's eyes flickered as he stared intently at the young Master Yuhai before him. The Yuhai Spirit King is known for comprehending all things. Their channels of information are spread across the 10,000 realms, and it seems that each world has a creature known as the Information Worm, through which a vast amount of information can be captured and sent back to Dark Sea. No need. Young Master Ash revealed a cold smile. I will personally find that ant. And Xinghe at this moment was also looking at young Master Yuhai. He paused, but did not speak. He was indeed very interested in someone, and he wanted to find their tracks. 2 months ago, when the mixed fish piano noticed that this young master was getting tired of 2 tigers, it started to worry since, as a piano player, it only had that one score uploaded by the sect hierarch, couldn't come up with anything new. To avoid being discarded, and seeing that the other seemed very interested in the sect hierarch, it began to expand its business. Through the score, it relayed the story of the Hustlers sect hierarch. It adapted the story according to the epic heroics of its own world every day. It wrote 4,000 characters in blood on the score sheet, constantly creating adventures across various worlds with the sect hierarch as the protagonist, to keep things fresh. It called this method of writing an infinite stream. And in Xinghe, while skeptical of the content it narrated, did not burst its bubble. After all, the tales this creature spun were among the rare fun in a land filled with eeriness. Although the story it tells might be false. But this Hustler's sect hierarch should exist. Even if they were just an ordinary person, and Xinghe was still quite interested in them. However, now wasn't the time to think about this. This time, attending the auction was but a temporary stop, a brief rest, waiting for the hidden protector strength to cool down completely, and then they could rebuild the channel and the three of them continue toward the anxious land. Su Qi silently observed the three young masters of the Spirit Kings. Although they were in host seats, it was outright impossible to be seated before the three young masters of the Spirit Kings. So, he was able to take advantage of his position behind them, using the question mark to look through the information of the three, one by one. And just earlier, Su Qi saw the same piece of information appearing simultaneously above the heads of young Master Ash and young Master Sunset, and Xinghe, seeking to find the Hustlers' sect hierarch. How should I put this? I was still a bit surprised when I saw these two pieces of information. Are these two actually looking for me? The question mark in the information changes with the state of the character, their mood, and the environment. Generally, the most prominent information at the moment has the highest chance of appearing, like how traces can be covered by dust. Very metaphysical, yet also very useful. This theory of traces was learned from the Master of Destruction, who mentioned the traces of the old days multiple times. This seemed to be something important. And at the moment, Su Qi was thinking, when had he come into contact with these two? He recalled the Linyuan land. The existence behind the casino was a spirit prince's heir. He had smashed up their establishment and even left the banner of the Hustlers sect. Good. I can confirm that the Ash Spirit King is not coming for an autograph, but for revenge. The other one, Su Qi turned his gaze toward young Master Sunset. He had a bit of an impression of this one. Russell had mentioned the word sunset in the spaceship. After all the materials on the entire ship were turned over to the sky gold of the Yuhai Spirit King. If he had to say there was some connection. Su Qi thought of the mixed fish piano that appeared on the list, and he remembered his name was left on it too. Anyway, it proves that a boomerang always comes back unexpectedly and without warning. But this is also an opportunity. Su Qi's gaze focused on Nancy as she finished a segment of the show and walked off stage with a smile. At that moment, Nancy felt a chill at her back, turned around to look, but found nothing seemed to have changed, then walked off stage. The show had already gone through several segments. Retreating backstage, Nancy looked at the holographic screen which showed the young Master Spirit Kings with a grave expression, noticing that the atmosphere around them was still not relaxed, and he sighed gently. Boss, you're sighing again. The assistant tilted her head and spoke gently. You are the superstar that everyone's watching. Superstar. Nancy laughed, but it was not as natural as before. He said with a touch of self-mockery. It looks glamorous on the surface, but in reality, it's an empty show of strength. In this world, without backing or strength, one will ultimately be secondary. He saw very clearly that there seemed to be a lot of undercurrents quietly emerging in the present world, and it was probably going to become more and more dangerous. In a civilization that hasn't completely collapsed, a star might be adored by everyone. But once pollution invades, destruction begins. When people no longer live for entertainment but start worrying about surviving, then he would be less than trash on the roadside. So he could only serve any one of the Spirit Prince's heirs well. After all, they represent the real big backgrounds, the major forces. If he could cling to one, in the future's unknown, unpredictable chaos, the homeland behind him and the people he cared about would also have some sanctuary and way out. However, that was my previous thought. Now I just hope to finish this oppressive hosting as soon as possible. The quieter the auction afterwards, the better. Nancy sighed again, thinking of clinging to anyone, considering the atmosphere of the three, looking at young Master Ash's temperament. It was simply not something he could consider. The auction was even more likely to cause disputes, and he would become the most vulnerable in the fire. And at that time, a voice rang out from a distance. Sighs only add weight to your troubles and can't change bad situations. Nancy's body trembled slightly as he saw Su Qi's figure. His pupils constricted. How did you get backstage? Su Qi walked over leisurely, smiling. As one of the organizers, Isn't it right for me to inspect backstage? Nancy hurriedly looked at the holographic screen where the organizers were seated. A strong man was sitting on Suchi's seat, somewhat at a loss. Had they switched places? He pressed his temples with headache. What exactly do you want to do? I'm already under a lot of pressure. I'm naturally here to help you share the burden and solve worries. Hearing you say that makes me more apprehensive. That's rather hurtful. Suchi shook his head and reached out his hand. As the only person who can understand you, you have to trust me. Nancy. He silently clipped the microphone to his back. Trust you, my ass. You want to grab the microphone, don't you? I can see that. Chapter 187. The status of the mixed fish piano. Good grief, that cautious? Suchi didn't mind. He wrapped his arm around the other's shoulder and said gently, You're thinking about how to end this auction normally without trouble, right? Nancy paused for a moment, then nodded. Suchi continued to urge persuasively, But those three don't seem to mix well, like water and fire. There are bound to be frictions and contention during the auction. As the host, you'll find it difficult to keep an eye on everything in the midst of this mayhem, fearing you might offend one of them, right? Yes. Nancy felt that what Suchi just said was indeed correct. This guy really was the one who understood his situation the best now. Although the auction hadn't officially started, these were exactly the kind of troublesome events that were bound to happen. When the time came, it would be a deadly balancing act. To maintain that balance would be practically impossible. Can I only tell you that this line of thinking is wrong? Ha! Nancy was slightly startled. As they say, the bigger the chaos, the more opportunities, Suchi said softly. Instead of sitting around waiting to be killed, why not just go for broke? Nancy's eyelids twitched. Wait a minute. I haven't finished speaking. You don't need to. Nancy felt his scalp tingle. Oh, it seems you've gotten the point without me having to spell it out. Understand my ass. From what Suchi had said, Nancy could already sense a danger that was beyond the ordinary. He took a deep breath. Don't you see, from everything that's happened so far, how high the status of those three young masters is, and how dangerous it would be to anger them? I just want peace, but you seem to thrive on causing chaos. And I can't believe I'm seriously listening to you here. Nancy pressed his brow. I'm so stupid, really? Fine, I won't persuade you any further. Suchi looked leisurely towards the outside. The auction will start after this show ends. Go get ready for now. During the intermission, you can consider what we discussed. Nancy's expression paused for a moment. How did this guy know the sequence of the program so well? But Nancy also glanced at the time. The show was almost over and the main event, the auction, was next. He gave Suchi a deep look. Don't worry. I'll be on stage during the intermission, and I won't consider it. I will uphold a professional MC's poise, steadily maintain balance, and host everything perfectly. Good. That's the spirit, but... Suchi smiled. I suspect things won't go so smoothly. You can come to me for help if it gets tough. Nancy's face darkened. How could I possibly come to you for help? You wish. But Suchi just smiled and didn't say more. Nancy felt an inexplicable unease. He was a smart man, but he didn't understand where Suchi's confidence came from. He tucked his anxiety away in his heart, adjusted his clothes, took another deep breath, and headed towards the waiting area. He had lost count of how many deep breaths he'd taken. Suchi watched him go. He was naturally very familiar with the program schedule, including all kinds of auction items. The auction was divided into the first half, an intermission, and the second half. The first half wasn't highly valuable. The items auctioned from different worlds were mainly for entertainment, aesthetic enjoyment, and specialty goods, while the second half contained the most important items, including pollutants, abnormality slaves, totems, fragments, and so on. However, he had given Simon the responsibility for these matters, including what to auction and how to auction them. If it came to bidding against other power players, just drive up the price. If the Spirit Prince's heir got involved, then back off. The money would be deducted from his account, so even though it was Simon doing the bidding, it would still increase his points. Su Chi looked at the main quest panel. There were 3 main quests in total. 1. Enter the Stars Hall. 2. Obtain 1 auction item, must be from an official seat, and the item must be able to be taken out of the instance. 3. Achieve a reputation with the 100 alliances. At least 100 of the VIPs must be left with a deep impression of you. The first main quest is already completed, offering the option for the player to teleport away, but without a countdown. Completing each main quest awarded different levels of points. Increasing points through spending is very inefficient. A single ticket only added 3,000 points, and completing the first main quest awarded 5,000 points. The second offers 10,000, and the third, 1,000,000. It's important to note that there's a huge difficulty gap between the 3 main quests, but the points awarded are quite conservative. It seems that these points not only affect the ranking but will undoubtedly play a very important role in the subsequent ranking battles. Nevertheless, the total of the 3 main quests I have now is still less than my loose change. Su Chi looked at his points pool and cyber coins. The former had broken past 1 million, while the latter had already surpassed tens of billions. He, as the president of the Hustlers Chamber of Commerce, the ultimate beneficiary of the Aaron system operations, along with the support from Life Group and the injection of funds for capital operations. His points seemed to be a little bit too much, and they were still increasing. However, that's quite normal. There appears to be no problem for now. Su Chi closed the panel. He walked towards the lower backstage, which was where the auction items were stored. He was there to catch up with the mixed fish piano. All the auction items were in the underground warehouse transport area. As long as an instruction was sent, they would be carried to the stage by conveyor belts. But the mixed fish piano was special. It wasn't an auction item, but it was brought in by Xinghe for a blockbuster performance during the intermission. Although the term blockbuster seemed quite far from mixed fish. Nevertheless, according to the information Su Chi had gathered, those responsible for getting close to it in Night City were several representatives of the strongest EMTs. Was it getting pampered under young Master Sunset, with the luxury of savory food and strong drinks, hence becoming more powerful? With the access chip granted by Life Group, one of the event's organizers, Su Chi quickly reached the warehouse transport area. In the area, workers were transporting the auction items for the first half, and many people were directing robots to adjust and operate the machines. There was a large amount of pollutants, filling the air with a weird aura. The items in this area were quite special, and many staff members were looking with a headache at a piano splattered with bloodstains. It emitted an astonishing aura of pollution, and even without making a sound, the blood on it was enough to unsettle people. All the other items are manageable, but if we get within 5 meters of this piano, we'll pass out. It seems we'll have to call the EMTs. Su Chi walked over. What happened? Who are you? One of the workers stared blankly at Su Chi. He showed his pass. I'm the person in charge from the organizer's side. I came to check how the work is progressing. Now all the elite factions were sitting upright above, and indeed this was the highest level access chip from Life Group. Although he was marginalized and had many permissions banned, the lower level personnel were not aware of this. The logistics transport manager immediately frowned deeply. The situation is like this. Due to the reduced program schedule, we've had to prepare many tasks in advance. We're hastily placing many items in their rightful places. But this piano, it seems to have thrown a tantrum after we hurried the transportation and caused quite a commotion. It's giving off terrifying pollution, and we can't get close to it now. My goodness. Throwing a tantrum and being a diva on the spot? No need to call the EMTs. Let me take a look. You! The manager was startled, but he saw Su Chi had already walked over. He quickly warned, be careful. Don't get too close. The blood-stained piano was stored in an isolated area, and the aura it exuded permeated around 10 meters. The thick smell of blood even created a mist. It definitely wasn't pleased. Being moved to this area and causing some noisy disturbances, it all affected its mood for later when it would go on stage. What was its status now? A treasured possession cherished by young Master Spirit King. And their status? Was someone else approaching? The aura of pollution thickened momentarily, as if intending to repel this person. But the person's steps didn't halt. What's going on? It looked over in that direction. A face, familiar and smiling, was looking at it. The musical scores seemed to tremble violently, as if reflecting its inner turmoil, warping and twisting with letters continuously emerging. Sect, 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 sect hierarch. Chapter 188. Nancy's Deadly Trap. Mixed Fish Piano's momentum instantly wilted away. If young Master Spirit King's presence brought a stasis rooted in status and the intimidation of survival, then Su Buxian truly commanded compliance through a complex cocktail of inner fear and gratitude, among other emotions. After all, it had once witnessed a great terror on Su Qi and owed its current status to him, in terms of cause and effect. The person in charge watched the scene in shock, uncertain of how the other party had achieved this, but he quickly commanded his people, "Quick! While there's a chance, move the nearby items." Su Qi sat in front of it. "Don't you have anything to say to me?" Mixed Fish Piano carefully bled out words in blood. "Say what? Of course, why young Master Sunset would take an interest in me." Su Qi smiled as he looked at it. "You wouldn't have spoken ill of me, right?" The Mixed Fish Piano frantically bled out words in defense, not knowing why. But when Su Qi's black pupils gazed at it, it felt an inexplicable sense of oppression and suffocation. Although it didn't need to breathe, its soul felt as though its throat was being squeezed. So it didn't leave out anything and began to explain everything. Su Qi did take note of this. He had been able to intimidate the octopus pollution abnormality before and hadn't expected his power to be even more evident against higher purity pollutants. 2 minutes later, Su Qi understood the whole story. So that's how it. Su Qi watched as lines of blood text rapidly arranged and revealed themselves. "No wonder you've become so quick at typing. But this also gives me an idea," he mused. The Hustler's Chamber of Commerce could delve into the entertainment aspect, and later they could have Mixed Fish Piano as the editor-in-chief, capable of making music and being a copywriter. Of course, for 1,000 words a day, that was too few. In his world, that only qualified for perfect attendance, scorned by readers, so more practice was needed. Mixed Fish Piano stared blankly at the pondering Su Qi, unaware of his thoughts, but it felt a vague apprehension. Cautiously sent out a message. "Sect leader, I need to go play soon. Don't rush." Su Qi's fingers pressed on the piano keys, playing 2 notes and smiled. "I need you to do something for me, something very important." Though it was pitched as a discussion, the smile on his face made Mixed Fish Piano's music quiver. "It concerns an upcoming major event." The auction was in full swing, but Nancy was sweating profusely. When the performances began, the atmosphere among the three had already turned unpleasant, though it hadn't come to anything serious since they were just watching. Yet, as soon as the bidding started, friction came quicker than she had anticipated. All three were people who never worried about resources. When they wanted something, no one dared to compete. When such individuals collided, coveting the same item, everything was different. Everyone else at the venue didn't dare to participate. As soon as one of the young masters spoke up, they would immediately opt out. Though the items were not highly valuable in themselves, the bidding had persisted for a good few minutes, driving the prices up to 10-fold or even 100-fold their original value. Nancy's scalp tingled. The key was that everyone spoke calmly, as if it was a normal bid, but everyone could smell the gunpowder in the air. "Please continue, the two of you," and Xinghe said, his expression remaining undisturbed as he withdrew first. Young Master Ash squinted and said, "What's the matter? Didn't bring enough money? I could lend you some if you ask." And Xinghe replied calmly, "Overpaying for such a trifle, beyond its actual value, would just be laughable." Though each world has its currency system, for those capable of trading across dimensions, there were two methods of transaction. One was to trade items based on their value. The other was a universally accepted currency in the present world, known as spirit coins. It was an energy composite, congealed from both pollution and spiritual energy, which are the most common substances in the present world, making it the universal currency. Previously, in Linyuan land, the coins used at Pure Land City Casino were spirit coins. At that time, not only did various abnormalities desire to obtain it, but all sorts of pollutants and oddities in Pure Land City could trade a portion of their strength or even higher services with these coins. In the Sanctuary Worlds, a significant part of the Sky Gold submitted were spirit coins. Young Master Yuhai, listening to Nxinghe's words, rasped a chuckle. How should I put it? That's not entirely right. After all, money can't buy willingness, and we all aren't lacking a bit. But you're right about one thing, it's pointless to keep fighting over it. He said comfortably, let's give this little item to you, emphasizing the word deliberately as he spoke. Young Master Ash narrowed his eyes slightly, looking at Nancy and said, aren't you going to announce it? Nancy hastily banged the gavel. Congratulations to the esteemed young Master Ash for winning this item from Spirit Cage World. Such situations. The most difficult for him to handle. Nancy had anticipated such scenarios, but had not envisaged them occurring so soon and with such urgency. But there was nothing he could do, except to maintain a smile and be swept along in the midst. Furthermore, this was only the beginning. After all, the first half was filled with items of low practical value. The second half held the real significance. Expected friction would be even more intense, and the three would not yield as they had. What then should he do? And Nancy had a vague suspicion, though she dared not confirm it, that it seemed like one of the young masters was deliberately fanning the flames, stirring up opposition. Chapter 189. The first half continued for nearly 2 hours, during which the three calmly bid, calmly competed, and calmly spoke. However, the atmosphere around them grew increasingly restless, filled with a sense of oppression. During these 2 hours, Nancy also seemed to perceive who was fanning the flames. She couldn't help but glance towards young Master Dark Sea, whose deep eyes appeared calm, but he would always take the initiative to speak up, stoking the fire and adding pressure whenever it seemed to die down. His tactics were very clever. He was involved in it as well without being noticed by the other two. Nancy himself wanted to smooth things over, to ease the increasingly tense mood among them. But he was always interrupted by a few mocking words or actions from young Master Dark Sea. Because of this, Nancy couldn't help but sense something was amiss. Damn it! If it's really like that, what is its goal? And he couldn't help but recall the words Su Chi had said to him backstage. Had that guy already noticed this? At this moment, looking towards young Master Dark Sea, Nancy constantly felt uneasy, as if some major event beyond his expectations was about to unfold. He possessed a jade pendant. This item was extremely sensitive to detecting murderous and malicious intent, and was exceedingly rare. As a superstar himself and not very powerful, he naturally attracted many dangerous abnormalities. This pendant was for defending against crises. Right now it was intensely heating up, and the source of the heat was none other than young Master Dark Sea. Nancy seemed to see a fleeting, savage murderous intent in Dark Sea's lowered gaze. Nancy's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Then, at that moment, young Master Dark Sea suddenly raised his eyes and looked towards Nancy. Their gazes met for an instant. Damn! Nancy felt as if he had been struck by lightning, trembling all over, and quickly looked away. His heart pounded violently, but he forcefully suppressed it. Next, let's introduce the next auction item. He raised the microphone, seemingly without any panic, not revealing the slightest flaw, as he introduced the next auction item to everyone. Was I noticed watching it? No. It shouldn't be the case, as I moved my gaze away very swiftly, just like a passing glance, and now I was introducing it normally, relying on my professional level. But what was that murderous intent just now? The heat told Nancy that the intent was very strong. After introducing the auction item, Nancy could still proceed with the flow. Next comes the bidding. This auction item starts at 100,000 spirit coins, And then, young Master Ash narrowed his eyes, seemingly very interested in the item. I bid 200,000. Okay. Young Master Ash bids 200,000. Nancy's gaze naturally moved over, but he suddenly noticed young Master Dark Sea's abnormal face, carrying a sinister smile, staring at him. This smile sent shivers down Nancy's spine as if he had been seen through completely. He felt like he'd fallen into an icy abyss. I bid 500,000. Young Master Dark Sea spoke gently, his gaze not on the auction item or on others, but on Nancy, with a smile that seemed to carry an unclear meaning. Afterward, young Master Dark Sea's gaze casually drifted away, his face changing expressions like a mask, the eerie smile vanishing from it. It seemed to again become a reciprocal pricing war, triggering friction and conflict, even drawing in Nshingha. Does anyone offer more? Nancy held the microphone in his hand, but it trembled imperceptibly. He could feel it. A terrifying danger was looming over him, extremely deadly. The pendant over his chest was heating up as if it was going to penetrate his skin. He was a very smart person, or he wouldn't be standing on this stage, becoming a superstar in the spotlight. He also deeply understood the mentality of those in high positions. After all, dignitaries would occasionally participate in his show, and he often had to guess their thoughts. Through the jade pendant, he could also understand their mood and whether he might offend them. So, Nancy, upon noticing that barely detectable murderous intent, upon seeing that sinister smile of young Master Dark Sea, had already fully understood what young Master Dark Sea intended to do. He wanted to kill, and the one to be killed was one of the young Master Spirit Kings. Or perhaps both. This terrifying thought right now surged through his heart like a relentless tidal wave. Nancy felt a chill throughout his body, dread in his heart. Why did he have to detect this? Why did he have to take another look? The sinister smile from just now seemed to already know his inner thoughts. Though he did not know how Dark Sea managed it, Nancy was only clear about one thing. This young Master Dark Sea was no mere second-generation wealthy child or immature playboy. His thoughts were meticulous, deep as the abyss, his true nature profoundly hidden. He probably wouldn't make it out of Stars Hall and Night City alive. Nancy, holding the microphone and wearing his professional smile to introduce the auction items to countless people. Only he knew how intense his fear and despair were growing. This was an event that could shake countless worlds. To put it differently, it was akin to killing a crown prince, not just any ordinary one, but a young Master Spirit King. To be killed with the presence of the 7 Spirit Kings, respected like mountains over numerous worlds in the present world, would surely provoke the Spirit King's wrath. The existing balance would likely be shattered. Nancy dared not think any further. His heart was beating uncontrollably, fear spreading throughout his body. Chapter 190. He only hated himself for being so clever, so perceptive for what? He didn't know why. At this moment, although Nancy's heart was filled with fear and despair, the image of Su Buxian suddenly appeared in her mind. That guy. When she went on stage, he had said that not everything would go smoothly, and had even told her to consider asking for his help during the intermission, as if he were certain something would happen. Could it be? Nancy recalled Su Chi's mocking tone and immediately dismissed the thought. Impossible. Nancy felt her ideas were utterly absurd. That guy was just messing around, joking. How could he possibly have foreseen these events? Haha. Nancy let out a self-deprecating laugh in her heart. Her thoughts were now completely chaotic. She was actually indulging in wild thoughts. And now, the last item of the first half of the auction was up for grabs, and the competitors for this final bid were surprisingly young Master Ash and Nshingha, while young Master Yuhai, who rarely missed out, was not participating. He even seemed to be urging the two to be more harmonious, given there was still the second half to come. Nshingha's eyes narrowed slightly. It's rare to see. Are you actually playing the good guy here? Young Master Ash responded with a smile. Just a bit of sarcasm. Why bother? Their tone was no longer as calm as before, and their words carried a hint of emotion. Young Master Yuhai tapped on the armrest. You're looking at me like this? Then I must be too innocent. I just think the time spent on one auction item has been dragged out too long. Wouldn't it be better to save the real competition for the more valuable items in the second half? Young Master Yuhai even looked towards Nancy with an abnormal smile. Presenter, Nancy, right, what do you think? With a lump in his throat, Nancy held the microphone, his hands and feet ice cold, but he still had to respond with a smile. As long as the young masters are happy, I'll cooperate however necessary. His underlying message was a plea for mercy. But young Master Yuhai did not speak again, and no one could guess its thoughts or intentions. The last auction item fell into the hands of Nxinghe. Nancy took a deep breath. So that concludes the first half of our auction. And now is the intermission, a time to relax. Apart from audience interaction and random draws, we also have a performance provided by the respected young Master Sunset. The celebrations at Stars Hall were grand, and naturally there wouldn't be much downtime. Following the normal procedure, his segment still involved a lot of interactive draws, helping everyone relax. But now, not a bit relaxed, and then Nancy slowly snapped his fingers. The whole stage changed accordingly, not only featuring machines for the lottery and interaction, but also a piano stained with bloodstains slowly emerged on the platform. At the same time, another figure appeared. Nancy's pupils trembled, watching as the figure slowly lifted the microphone, waving and smiling toward the audience. Hello, everyone. I am the host for the intermission. I will be working with Nancy to interact with you all. Nancy fell into silence. He couldn't have predicted that Su Qi would appear in this way. He was even more surprised that the audience, including the three young masters, seemed to think it was entirely normal. But now it all seemed irrelevant. Nancy sighed inwardly and silently decided to see Su Qi safely off the stage. After all, this guy appeared oblivious to the dire situation at hand and, whether intentionally or not, had offered to help him. He didn't need to drag another person into this mess. Chapter 191. We must make them fight each other. Next, please enjoy the solo performance. The melodies of the mixed fish piano slowly reached everyone within Stars Hall, echoing throughout the vast space. Countless people pricked up their ears to listen, although Nxinghe lacked the temperamental nature of young Master Ash. But as a young master's belonging, they all had to cooperate no matter what. Now was its time for a solo performance, and a strange aura surged on the high platform. Nxinghe watched with satisfaction, pleased with the performance. He had also collected quite a few scores for it, many of which had significant artistic value. However, personally, he felt that the more appealing piece was still the previous version of DJ's Two Tigers Love to Dance. At this moment, the solo of the mixed fish piano continued its course. Nancy, from within the shadows, silently observed Su Qi. He let out a slight sigh. Nancy had already heard the backstage crew asking him through the headset if this was his special arrangement. Special arrangement, my ass. Still, Nancy responded to them, then muted his headset. I can only say, you shouldn't have come up here. Nancy shook his head gently before speaking slowly. Leave after the intermission ends. Whatever you're planning to do, you shouldn't continue to participate. His tone was solemn and serious, lacking the usual trace of jest. Are you done, classmate Nancy? Su Qi didn't look at him, instead gazing towards the distant audience. If you're done, then listen to what I have to say. He spoke with a mysterious tone. Actually, I can tell fortunes. Nancy fell silent. Not a single word he had just said had been heard, and then out of nowhere Su Qi says he can tell fortunes? What is even the connection? Like that short, plump dignitary in the middle of the VIP section, 10th row. He's been holding his pee but is too scared to leave his seat at this moment, so he's secretly trying to use a bottle. Question mark. And that well-suited, burly man in the ordinary section to the left. Despite his upright and serious appearance with a full beard, he's a pervert. Underneath, he's wearing women's lingerie and is also wearing a tulle, with various words written on his body. Oh. Then there's that female abnormality. Although she's being quite sweet with her boyfriend beside her, she has actually undergone gender reassignment more than 13 times. And the prerequisite for such a change is to consume other abnormality. It looks like her boyfriend will be next. Nancy's expression was somewhat dumbfounded. Setting aside whether any of this was true, why was it all about perverts? And what the hell does this have to do with fortune-telling? I can see that you're quite impressed with my fortune-telling ability. I'm only impressed by your ability to make things up. Nancy took a deep breath. What on earth are you trying to say? He was considering whether he should just drag this guy down with him. What I'm trying to say. Su-Chi looked at him and said, your forehead is shadowed, your eyes are lifeless, your lips cracked and tongue dry, your primordial spirit scattered. I fear, life and death calamity looms. Nancy's heart skipped a beat. As these words emerged, he couldn't help but recall the previously dismissed thought. And my calculations suggest, it seems to involve one of the young masters. With that statement, Nancy finally confirmed his earlier notion, trembling slightly. How could you know? Don't ask. If you ask, it's a divine secret not to be revealed. Su-Chi sighed lightly. After all, a young master wants you dead. You're probably done for. I suggest you hand over your bank card and the password to me. Nancy chose to ignore the latter half, feeling somewhat overwhelmed at the moment, his heart even inclining towards believing that this guy really could tell fortunes. Otherwise, how could he possibly know all this? If that's the case, Nancy's voice was somewhat hoarse. If you know this is a dangerous and deadly threat, why would you actively confront it? After deducing the true purpose of young Master Dark Sea, he couldn't help but feel unparalleled terror within his heart. Fear involuntarily rising because, no matter what happened next, he was bound to be dealt with. Otherwise, the jade pendant on his chest wouldn't be insanely heating up as a warning. Of course, it's because of... Su-Chi looked at him and said, Our friendship. Our friendship, is it even as big as a fingernail? And you can lie without blushing. Furthermore, Su-Chi paused. More importantly, it's not just going to kill you. The entirety of Night City won't be able to escape. Nancy's expression froze, some shock and doubt arising in her heart. What? Su-Chi had two objectives. One was to directly pull Nancy over to the Hustler's Chamber of Commerce and sign a contract. The other was because, after young Master Dark Sea made his move, the whole Night City, including illegal land, would be taken care of, as if fearing that any traces might reveal themselves and attract the pursuit of those with the traits to observe. Traces were indeed mystical, containing all sorts of microinformation, and even if no one saw it or left evidence, information would still not fade away. The ability of the observers was profiling, which required a great deal of strength, numerous rituals, and related items to find fragments of information from various details. Of course, the trouble in this was immense. Normally, to thoroughly deal with all fragments, there were many methods, but the simplest and most brutal was likely something like meteor falls, pollution invasions, abnormality descents, and other accidents which would directly destroy everything. By then, young Master Dark Sea would turn this place into a hell on earth, and all living things would vanish like smoke. One can only say, not all young masters are incompetent. He looked like a spoiled young master similar to young Master Ash, but in reality, he was the most calculating and ruthless. However, his own The Hustler's Chamber of Commerce had just begun to take shape, taking root in illegal land, and still growing, preparing to use Night City as a stepping stone to gradually go international. How could he possibly let it be destroyed so easily? Su-Chi mused to himself. Nancy's fingers trembled a bit. Why would it do this? If he were to die alone, he could accept it, but to involve others. The face of his assistant appeared in his mind. Don't ask. If you ask, it's because of a psychological disturbance, said Su-Chi softly. So, do you now understand the situation you're in? Nancy's face turned pale. I understand. It's a dead end. Good, you understand thoroughly. Even a fish that's just died knows to flip its tail in the pan. And you just accept your fate? Su Chi shook his head. Are you sure you don't want to gamble with me? Nancy's eyes trembled. Do you have a way out? This matter was of great importance, and he felt that Su Chi seemed to be completely calm, as if he had a winning hand, which made him involuntarily harbor a sliver of hope. You can assume that there is. Nancy's eyelids twitched. The statement was made with confidence but left no reassurance. Was there a way out or not? Su Chi extended a finger. In any case, there is only one thing we need to do now, and that is to make them fight each other without burning bridges. And we also need to drag young Master Dark Sea into the fray. With every word Su Chi uttered, Nancy shivered. After hearing everything, she stared wide-eyed and nearly shouted, How on earth can we achieve what you're proposing? An hour later, Nancy watched, frozen, as the three young masters stood calmly in midair, their strength and auras flickering, their eyes alight with real fire. He murmured to himself, They really are going to fight. Nancy's gaze returned to the stage. There were only two reasons for the fight. One was the item on the auction platform in the middle, emanating an abnormal aura. The other was, Nancy looked at Su Chi with complex eyes. He was the real instigator. Chapter 192 Pray to Evil God. For the young master of the Dark Sea, the present world was like a round table pressed upon the tips of several knives. All the beings in this still undisturbed balance were struggling hard to survive. Even though the pollution from the abyss was spreading and infiltrating, countless worlds were collapsing in the undertow. But those were ultimately insubstantial and weak existences, screaming, fearing, and roaring amidst the collapse, yet as inconspicuous as ants. And to disrupt this balance, to whip up waves in the still harmonious present world, only a colossal entity could act, like various divine sects, forces, or the Spirit King. The Spirit King can't move, but killing any one of these two young masters would set off a chain of reactions. The young master from the Dark Sea said with a deep and eerie gaze, It's just. At this moment, the young master of the Dark Sea's eyes coldly fixed on Su Chi. This guy. In the latter half, the auction item that would ignite fierce competition, the atomic heart, would appear on stage. This item was extremely precious, presented at the auction through an anonymous channel. The trio's expressions brightened slightly when they saw it. Aware of its rarity, they fiercely outbid each other, with none willing to relent. But actually, on the surface, the young master of the Dark Sea fought fiercely, yet his heart was very calm, because this atomic heart was sent by him, hidden with coordinate locators and lethal patterns on it. The earlier agitation was to make the two young masters compete intensely, and he would feign withdrawal at the last moment. As long as this secret treasure was taken by either of the two, he and several powerful beings lurking in the shadows could locate them based on the hidden coordinates. Then they would pursue and assassinate. It would not expose him and would also divert trouble away. He was aware of the two's killing skills and had prepared methods to frame others, while he would also appear in the anxious land in a severely wounded state. The death of a young master would inevitably enrage the Spirit King, affecting countless aspects of the present world. The gears of order were set in motion. The originally balanced round table would also begin to tilt. And now, the young master of the Dark Sea's expression flickered with a hint of darkness, looking at the unfolding scene around him. Everything was deviating from the plan. When he tried to extricate himself, the host named Su Buxian came up with a new resolution. When he wanted to scornfully retort this guy daring to teach them what to do, and Xinghe surprisingly accepted it, and the challenged young Master Ash, with cold eyes, also agreed, naturally dragging him into the fray. The three would fight to claim the atomic heart at the center of the stage. But it's not a big problem. The two indeed had a tense atmosphere, and I successfully provoked their genuine anger. I just need to play along, to graciously give up this atomic heart. The young master from the Dark Sea naturally couldn't take it, since all the traps hidden on it were for assassination. At this moment, Su Chi looked at the image in the sky, where the three were fighting within the miniaturized terrain. This and the last show look the same, although it looks like real space, it's actually a virtual realm, right? Nancy nodded. It's actually a combination of real items and illusion realm, specially made for the Playhaven show effect. Quite clever. But if too much is destroyed, the illusion realm will vanish. But, Nancy said solemnly, I didn't expect you could really get the three young masters to agree to your proposal. Su Chi paused. All the previous friction has stoked their emotions, and endless bidding had made them feel bored. It's better to directly vent through action. Of course, the most important thing was, and Xinghe taking the initiative to agree, otherwise, with young Master Ash's temperament, everything would still be uncertain. This also indirectly showed that Xinghe might have already received the message from the mixed fish piano. Outside Stars Hall, at least 10 high-sequence beings are covertly lurking, watching the three young masters. All attempts to warn them using spiritual energy can't be transmitted, nor can they approach. Using other methods, skills and equipment would also be detected, because once detected, it would probably lead to a confrontation. Su Chi observed this number from the dome, revealing the count. Besides, 1 bodyguard each for Xinghe and young Master Ash. The rest were fatal traps prepared by the young master from the Dark Sea. This number was not small, preparation was extremely thorough. The opposition did not want to tear their faces, wishing to assassinate silently. Hence they had not made their move yet, but if detected or if they reacted, the so-called assassination would probably turn into a direct confrontation. This also meant that tonight's Night City would get dragged along, leaving no trace behind. Although Su Chi felt the probability was small, the young master from the Dark Sea's mind was heavy, yet also cruel and insane. His look also made him feel slightly familiar, much like an abyss cultist. So it must be done covertly, not letting him notice, and it looks, the message has probably been successfully transmitted, and Xinghe should have received the warning. Su Chi raised his head to look at the miniaturized illusion realm. The three's battle was clearly ongoing, and the method of passage was quite simple. The opposition had a fondness for music, deeply researched scores, and was intimately familiar with every note. Among the many young masters of the Spirit King, he was the most artistically inclined. Su Chi altered some of the notes in the pieces that the mixed fish piano was to play. This section of notes was from a song that celebrated death, specifically the death sequence, implying death at one side. Chapter 193. He had the mixed fish piano play one tune after another, and Xinghe, hearing familiar positions but encountering different notes repeatedly, naturally noticed this. Of course, right now it's purely under my overestimation of his intelligence. If both of them truly feel passionate, it would be normal for them to rashly agree without staying calm. Su Chi withdrew his gaze. What should we do now? Nancy, though shocked that the three had started fighting, still felt extremely uneasy, especially after seeing the information transmitted by Su Chi's wristwatch, realizing that such a terrifying killing intent was hidden around them. This wristwatch had been infiltrated by the Super Dream Protocol, so there was no need to worry about other systems detecting it or drawing the attention of the high-sequence individuals in the dome. Their focus was currently on the three young masters. Wait, Su Chi said, and Xinghe is a smart man. He must have tried to send out a message without disturbing the enemy the moment he received the warning. But what if he didn't notice? Su Chi looked up. You see for yourself, although he is fiercely battling young Master Ash, he is actually just stalling him and letting young Master Yuhai go. But the latter keeps escaping yet suddenly rejoins the fray again. So after receiving the warning here, he has been buying time. Nancy took a deep breath, hope gleaming in his eyes. I didn't expect. This is the way to survival. You see hope. Yes. I'm not very optimistic. Nancy was startled, a sense of foreboding rising within him. Su Chi stared at the top of Xinghe's head, and his pupils flickered slightly. He tried several times to send out the message, but it was cut off by some channel. Something outside is jamming everything, yet it hasn't been detected by anyone. Nancy's eyes darkened. So what do we do? The opponent indeed appeared very well prepared, and very cautious, having set up such means in advance. It seemed they still had no chance. What are you doing? Nancy suddenly looked at Su Chi, as he had moved towards the mixed fish piano and pulled out the chair to sit down. While everyone is watching the scene above, it's indeed a bit awkward without music. Nancy stared wide-eyed. You're in the mood to play the piano now? Su Chi's fingers lightly pressed on the piano keys. Do you know about the descent events? Huh. Nancy was slightly startled. Descent events? An ancient strength, which is attracted to shrines or totems and such, projecting itself from a distant place. Nancy fell silent again. I know. Another term for this is prayer. The so-called descent events at least require the presence of a shrine, and the conditions are quite strict. The believers must have enough faith, must have the totem from the descender, and also conducts rituals along with a multitude of sacrifices to evoke the presence to respond by transmitting its strength and projection. Once it responds, it's also called a miracle by countless believers. This legend exists in many worlds. Many mythological figures are probably just manifestations of some high beings. So that's how it is, Su Chi mused to himself. Oh? Nancy stared wide-eyed. You didn't know this, and yet you spoke so convincingly earlier. For him, this was common knowledge, as not just the lowest believers, but many beings with high authority, could invoke the great true God through earnest faith, sacrifices, rituals, etc., praying for divine blessings. And the shrine could summon projections transmitting some amount of strength. This was also a main method used by countless protected worlds to prevent polluted invasions, a projection not necessarily representing the will of the shrine's own deity. Generally speaking, these are automated forces. Overall, triggering such a descent event is very strict. Sometimes just having faith requires 20 believers in black robes singing hymns around a bonfire all night, not to mention other things. So when Su Chi spoke, he merely felt this guy was joking. It sounds very strict, but... Su Chi earnestly said, I believe the one I am praying to will answer my call. Oh? Nancy, full of questions, couldn't help asking, who are you praying to? A completely selfless being, who once appeared before me from afar and gifted me its most precious possession, even in difficult times, never forgetting to defend my honor. Su Chi softly spoke. Nancy's pupils trembled. Are you talking about a worshipped being? It sounds like you're talking about your own brother. The mixed fish piano was also silent. It had successfully sent the message. But it wasn't some totem, and it had no connection with the existence mentioned by him. Why use me, at least give a notice? However, it silently presented the keys. Ultimately, whatever the sect hierarch wished to do, it was fine just to fulfill that, no need to ask too much, and it also knew, if things couldn't be broken through next, it would have to join the sect hierarch and the young master, together in death. Don't tremble. Su Chi placed his hand on the mixed fish piano. From now on, no matter what happens, you cannot stop emitting your aura, understand? In the previous event at Linyuan Land, I merely maneuvered a sheep head in the illusion realm, and the evil god's strength came searching for the scent, almost resulting in a projection descending, although it was ultimately stopped by the black-robed man. But Su Chi also discovered he had a deep connection with evil god, almost like making a phone call and the other party would rush over urgently. Chapter 194. Perhaps this is what brotherhood meant. Su Chi was once so touched that he spent the following period being extremely cautious, avoiding anything related to the sheep head, including associated items and scents, to prevent the descent from occurring. After all, his brother was still trapped in the abyss, and constantly projecting spiritual power was quite exhausting. But now, it was time. Su Chi activated the ancient god's heart. His spiritual power surged. His fingers played the music, and the sound of the past began to resonate slowly. In an instant, countless people inside the venue seemed to feel a slight chill. Under the enhancement of his own spiritual power, the sound of the past underwent a qualitative change, and the mixed fish piano was now dozens of times more powerful than before. It could better withstand the strangeness, and Su Chi did not target it, but allowed the effect to spread. Nancy's eyes trembled. He could not see what was happening. nor did he feel any special breath or power, but he just felt a sense of panic. At the same time, this was only the first step. Su Qi slowly activated the ability. Concrete, a sheep head pendant, gradually appeared around his neck. The importance of a shrine totem did not depend on size. Many shrines across worlds were constructed to be enormous or majestic, even terrifying, primarily to overwhelm the worshippers with grandeur so that they approached with piety and awe. The sound of the past seemed to originate from the abyss, now drawing the aura of the mixed fish piano, as a pollutant, to swirl around the sheep head pendant. One of Su Qi's eyes flickered slightly, containing a strange power that was sealed within. It felt drawn, but not as noticeably as before. It seemed that this eye had indeed become his own possession. However, now was the time to need you. It seems I have no choice but to do this. Su Qi did not hesitate and activated the title ability Simulation. He rarely used this ability, but it too contained a good amount of essence, which would also become more lifelike as his spiritual power increased. At this very moment, Nancy, who stood not far away, shuddered. Fear flashed in his eyes, for he felt horror and strangeness, as if a vast tide of darkness was swallowing him whole. Hold it together! Su Qi activated his ability, pulling Nancy into the Rubik's Cube space. This unique domain encompassed both of them, preventing even their breath from escaping. Naturally, Nancy was going to suffer. He stood trembling on the spot. With the combination of the old days and simulation, he felt as if he was in the abyss, his pupils dilating, muttering, "Abba, Abba, Abba." The mixed fish piano also began spouting blood, unable to withstand the true aura of an evil god as a pollutant. Hold on, mixed babble. Su Qi's eyes were bright. At this moment, the sheep head jade pendant on his chest was flashing with black mist, and a pair of hollow eyes were slowly revealing strange fluctuations like a black hole. The next instant, the entire sky suddenly began to darken. A faint wind blew slowly, and if one looked closely, a majestic and strange pale black was spreading above the sky dome. The hidden dozen or so powerful individuals in the Stars Hall shuddered in their gaze, sensing an unusual terror. Here it comes. A mighty power was descending from the sky dome. Boom! The sky dome exploded with a thunderclap. Every glass in the entire Stars Hall shattered. All holographic screens were forcibly shut down, and a series of lights and circuits went out. Many people fainted on the spot. At the same time, ritual constraints around the area were directly shattered. Good news! The blockage was lifted. With this commotion, young Master Yuhai and his subordinates would surely not dare act rashly. Bad news! Su Qi's eyelids twitched as a terrifying shadow began to appear. Su Qi could feel the oppression more than others. He stopped playing the sound of the past, canceled the simulation, and without any hesitation, he crushed the sheep head in his hand. However, the projection did not disappear immediately. This was bad. Though this was merely the power projection of an evil god, without the evil god's will, and likely not too powerful, the terrifying and bizarre spiritual pollution was devouring everything. Boom! What was shaking? Was Night City shaking? At this very moment, Nancy also recovered from just moments ago, gasping from the suffocating trance. He looked at the entire Stars Hall in horror, as well as at the three young masters, who also appeared extremely fearful with dilated pupils. The sky above the sky dome was a sea of blackened blood, as if some colossal phantom was looming within. Just a glance made Nancy feel as if he had been dragged back and forth into the deep sea. His face extremely pale. He quickly turned to Su Qi. His voice trembling, he asked, "What happened?" "Don't look at me." Su Qi responded righteously, "I don't know anything, and all this has nothing to do with me." But Su Qi looked into the distance. It seems that this situation has also resolved the so-called assassination deadlock. Indeed, the three young masters were pale. The powerful individuals around them tried to gather their strength to immediately take them away, but they could not open any passage. Any ritual performed was instantly shattered by the shockwaves. There could be no assassinations. However, Nancy's eyelids twitched, feeling the horrifying tremors, as a large number of fragments began to fall from the star's hull. He twitched the corners of his mouth. How did things get even worse? Chapter 195. Let the evil gods strike out. Night City. The evil god's shadow descended upon the entire dome. Not only the star's hull, but the entire Night City was completely paralyzed. A massive amount of circuits collapsed, cyborgs directly short-circuited and fell down, and even if there were people still conscious under this terrifying oppression, no one dared to raise their heads and look directly at it. This was not just suppression of strength, but a kind of fear from the depths of the soul, as if facing an existence of a higher order. They were not qualified to look directly at its true form. This oppressive feeling, this fear, who exactly is it? Whose projection has descended? More than a dozen strong figures stood in the hidden pathways, their eyes trembling slightly. Sequence path. The disparity between each level grew larger the further back you went. If someone said, Level 10 could defeat Level 9, that was normal. That was only at the beginning of the sequence path, when the gap between everyone was not that big. But as it went further back, the gaps between levels would increase exponentially, forming an insurmountable chasm. These strong figures, hidden in the shadows, although they had the strength to initiate rituals and open pathways, possessing a strength that the entire Night City could not resist, they were absolutely unable to glimpse the slightest bit of this shadow. Only from that breathtaking, suffocating fear of suppression they could deduce this shadow was certainly an existence of colossal proportions. Don't move. Don't act rashly. Their expressions were frightened, but they were also extremely cautious. At this point, they no longer cared about any assassination. They started to contact their young masters seriously and solemnly warned, Young master, please do not carry out any disrespectful actions. Do not harbor any hostility. We cannot resist this existence. They must protect their young masters. 3 young masters also received the information, their expressions trembling. They never expected such a situation to arise, and all combat activity had stopped at this moment. Damn it, what exactly is going on? Young Master Yuhai gripped his fist tightly, yet dared not move. As an abnormality, he was even more sensitive to this weird oppressive feeling, as if there was a sense of submission emanating from the heart. Impossible. It was a ruthless being too. The moment that feeling arose, it bit its tongue with its teeth, forcefully breaking that state of mind. Being born to be a king, how could it submit to another existence? The heaven's chosen son of the future was to step by step ascend to divinity, leaving behind the strongest, most shining trace in the epics. Impossible. It seems to be just an incarnation of strength, without will, as if subconsciously searching for something. A strong figure's eyes condensed. If it was just by sight, they could still resist this unconsciously emitted strange oppressive force. They did not ponder how the other had arrived at this place. In the present world, there are an infinite number of worlds, and the nihility between worlds is even more vast and immeasurable, containing all kinds of unpredictable objects such as abnormalities, fantasy, and so on. Chaos, catastrophe, destruction, death, abnormalities, all kinds of unpredictable events could happen. No one knows where these came from, as if they existed in the deepest part of nihility, unreachable by anyone. And there are quite a few related legends, records, traces. This kind of unpredictable existence often appears in various different worlds. Once it lands, it brings boundless oppression. But as long as you don't act rashly, it generally will pass by like a passing spirit taking a brief rest. However, when such a situation occurs, even if the other leaves, it's very likely to trigger a huge change in the entire world. The shadow in front of them was just like the aforementioned situation, but with no will within, like a walking corpse, yet they were still unable to glimpse the slightest, only able to temporarily shrink away. Now we can only wait for the other side to find what it wants or for the strength to dissipate and leave. Do you see the black fog around its body? The world rules have already reacted. Suppressing it, the black fog is slowly dissipating. But even so, we are not capable of resisting its existence. The strong figure's expressions were solemn, shivering with fear. The three young masters were the same, as well as all the other abnormalities, descendants of the Spirit Prince, and influential figures in the Stars Hall who had not passed out. They all stood in horror, not moving. The entire Stars Hall fell into a deathly silence. And this shadow of the evil god was also bewildered at this moment. The moment the fluctuation occurred, it felt the great anger of the original body, descending to this place with an unstoppable momentum. But just having arrived, the fluctuation disappeared in an instant, as if paused right then and there. The original body was still sealed in a distant place, unable to come in person. It was just a projection, carrying a very weak strength, only maintaining its existence so it would not be dissipated by the world rules. In this brief time, it was strictly following the orders of the original body, to find the source of that fluctuation and the trail of that despicable person, and then to tear it into 1,000 pieces. Just this burst of emotional fluctuation, and the whole Stars Hall was experiencing an earthquake. A large number of buildings collapsed. Su Qi critiqued. "See, this is what you get with rushed construction and shoddy workmanship. I bet 90% of the funds were swallowed up by some people." "Nancy, is now really the time to be commenting on this?" Boom, boom, boom. The projection was in the dome, with black fog rolling out in all directions, stirring up huge waves. Damn! Nancy's eyelids twitched wildly, watching the black fog fall, and any building that blocked the black fog was destroyed. Such terrifying power. Is this really just a projection? Seems like it's not a big problem. Su Qi looked up at the black fog, narrowing his eyes slightly, and his pupils returned to their normal color. Chapter 196. He had just felt a bit mischievous. But now it seemed that the situation wasn't so bad. The adversary's strength was very weak, though this weak strength was enough to destroy heavens and obliterate earths, but it also seemed to be constrained. Fortunately, he had cut the connection quickly. Although he had summoned the evil god's projection, the other party had not locked onto him, and at this moment, Su Qi had also erased all traces of what had happened before. Nancy looked toward Su Qi, having just fallen into a trance-like hell, unclear about all his actions. But he was no fool, realizing that this phantom had truly descended because of this guy. What a devout faith! In religion, at least he would be a priest-level being. Only then would the worshipped Lord value him so. Such a powerful projection was already terrifyingly abnormal. If it is the being you worship, now is the time to pray to it, asking for help to resolve our current dilemma. Nancy reminded him with surprise and suspicion. He was a smart man, seeing that this had to do with a series of actions Su Qi had just performed. Therefore, only if a faithful follower earnestly requested, would the other party respond. Request? Sorry, I, Su Buxian, have never begged anyone in my life. Nancy? Of course, the truth was the other party would rather tear him to shreds, go up and ask. Wouldn't that be delivering himself to the door? However, Su Qi was also waiting. The evil god's phantom strength was being restricted by some kind of rules, and the black fog on the phantom was gradually dissipating. It indicated that the other party's existence wouldn't last long. Of course, the premise is not to be found. Weird strength accompanied by black fog was descending. Everyone looked at the black fog with an expression of terror, trembling with fear and not daring to move. The phantom indeed wished to directly destroy this world, but its current strength was just a drop in the ocean compared to its real self. Moreover, there were world rules in place, restricting it from annihilating everything. Often the deeper the historical traces of the world, the more likely it had certain world rules. Here it comes. People looked in horror as a large amount of black fog descended. Under the black-red glow, it was like the apocalypse. The expressions of the powerful changed. The three young masters also turned pale at this moment. They were more perceptive of strength. After all, they could directly compare it with that of their family heads. With that kind of panic, dread, as if etched into the soul's spiritual impact, they could confirm they had never felt such things from their family heads, as if not even on the same level. What in the world is this terrifying existence? Extremely dangerous, no matter what. We must remain cautious and reverent. Can't move. can't arouse hostility. It will leave after it has finished searching. The powerful ones were frantically transmitting messages to their young masters. They saw through everything. Currently, they were like ants on the ground, staying still. Perhaps they wouldn't attract the others' attention, nor would it be interested in them, but a sudden escape or other actions that would likely be squashed to death with a casual step. No sooner had they finished speaking. Some nobles from Stars Hall turned pale with fear. Unable to endure the terrifying spiritual impact and weirdness, they shouted and ran away, and influenced by them, many beings in the same area also started to run in terror. Idiots, young Master Ash remarked coldly. And the next moment, their behavior was noticed. Large amounts of black fog moved as if it had found a target, drawn over there. Those people looked even more terrified, desperately running away, but how could they possibly outrun this black fog? They were directly engulfed, not even able to scream, as if they had lost their minds, eyes blood-red, faces distorted with madness, covering their heads and howling in pain. But they only howled for 2 seconds before, with a bang, their heads seemed to be churned clean, blood flowing from every orifice, eyes rolling back, falling to the ground. Not the slightest breath of life remained. Is this what spiritual pollution like killing is? Nancy's eyelids twitched uncontrollably. This was exactly like the black fog of old days, mixed with terrifying spiritual pollution. Ordinary people, merely after seconds of contact, went through phases of impact, collapse, insanity, and mental disorder, leaping to death. Evil God's phantom was meticulously searching through the whole night city, and the black fog was its means of search. Once it discovered his traces, it would personally act, and with one blow, it could reduce the entire Stars Hall and its surroundings to flat ground. Although from the question mark above its head, its strength would rapidly dissipate after releasing an attack. In short, the strength it was holding back was only good for one attack. If it's uncomfortable holding it back, I'd feel bad too. So let's just let evil Godbrother strike. Su Chi mused silently, staring at the atomic heart on the stage. This object's function could be used to get a sense of the next sequence pathway in advance, similar to enlightenment, allowing a preview of it, greatly aiding in breaking through the sequence. Of course, this could only work for beings below sequence 5. So many beings of the new era, including the young Master Spirit Kings, were vying for this item. After all, leveling up a sequence wasn't like in a game where you level up directly when you have enough experience. It instead required various conditions, involvements, and the further one progressed, the more difficult and stringent the ascension would become. Depending on the pathway, different resources and quantities were also needed. Most importantly, this thing is also very useful to me. Su Chi's sequence was self-developed, self-created, a unique pathway. In other words, there were no blueprints for subsequent steps, a completely broken path, and every step he took, each sequence he rose to required him to blaze a trail on this broken path. With this thing, it could reduce the difficulty of developing his own sequence. Chapter 197. Su Chi pressed his hand towards the atomic heart. What do you want to do? The one who spoke at this moment was young Master Ash, who directly spoke in a cold voice. As long as he didn't use spiritual energy and didn't try to escape, speaking wouldn't attract the attention of the black fog. He had already considered it his possession. Young Master Yohai's gaze was deep and cold, but he didn't speak. His eyes, however, were filled with murderous intent. He dared to take out such a precious object, which meant he was confident about retrieving it. At this moment, a weak individual was trying to take advantage during the chaos. He naturally would not agree, and Xinghe was watching Su Chi, his pupils slightly flickering. The young masters are mistaken. Su Chi slowly grasped the atomic heart in his hand, a small object surrounded by numerous chains, resembling a heart, but actually containing a strange core within. I am preparing to give this object to you. He directly threw it over to them. Question mark. Young Master Ash's eyes slightly narrowed, but after realizing that the black fog did not pounce as a result, he directly reached out and grabbed it. And at that moment, young Master Yohai's eyes turned cold, suddenly burst with astonishing spiritual energy, directly striking at young Master Ash. You! Young Master Ash's face changed. Without any hesitation, countless iron chains boomed out to defend. This object is mine. Young Master Yuhai hoarsely grabbed the atomic heart and did not give up. There was still a chance to complete the assassination if these two men died under the terrifying shadow, although he was also among them, but he still chose to risk it all with one last escape mechanism on his body, at a great cost, but able to leave without any constraints. Of course, only by himself. Everything here, including those strong ones who followed him, would probably die under the attack of this terrifying shadow. He took the initiative to burst out, spiritual energy crazily emerging, and the black fog moved greatly. Stars Hall. The phantoms on the dome were watching here. Their attention shifted over, making everyone present shudder. It's over. It's over. Nancy stared wide-eyed, intently watching the scene. Is he seeking mutual destruction? Su Qi. No, he can escape. Then aren't we doomed? If he doesn't escape, we're certainly doomed. Oh? The evil god phantom made no sound and took no action. But the sky above Stars Hall was already twisted. It wanted to directly crush this place. It wasn't because of the fluctuations in young Master Yohai's spiritual energy, but because it sensed a familiar aura inside. The strength of its own eyes was among them. The despicable person had voluntarily exposed himself. It did not ponder, merely acted according to commands. Boom! The terrifying aura caused everyone present to burst, blood flowing from every orifice. Damn it! Damn it! You're insane! Young Master Ash, disheveled, let out a startled roar. We'll all die together. And at that moment, young Master Yuhai merely looked at them coldly. No! A smile curled on his lips. Only you all will die. Without any hesitation, one hand holding the atomic heart, the other hand directly crushed his own heart, violently spitting out a mouthful of fresh blood afterward. His entire body continuously crumbled, like transforming into a shadow, as if twisted, painfully howling, leaving without any constraints. He wanted to escape. Everything here would turn to ashes. But he did not notice that, in the moment he left, the atomic heart in his hand had unknowingly transformed into a sheep head emitting a strange aura. Chapter 198, discussing investment before the instance ends. The black fog was boiling over, the terror, the grotesque, the pollution, and the bizarre twists, all brought by the power of the evil god, threatened to devour everything. This dangerous, enigmatic, and unfathomable force was like using a nuclear bomb to kill a mosquito transcending cognition. Even if it's just a silhouette, even if it only carries the power equivalent to a speck of dust in the desert, it still exudes such a terrifying, oppressive force. Su Qi realized he had underestimated the power of the divine beings. After all, the first time he encountered the evil god brother was when he first entered an instance, young and foolish, with little recognition of much. And later, the divine being he came into contact with was the master of destruction. Well, to be honest, the impression was even less profound, since the first time he was a young spiritual body, and the second time a young girl's spiritual body, neither possessing her full strength at the peak, probably also using an extremely small portion of her power like this evil god brother. However, just from the traits of her young spiritual body, one could discern the extraordinary nature of the master of destruction as a deity. The ability to reset the entire world was simply outrageous. It's unclear what rank she holds among the divine beings, but anyone with a title like Master of something is likely to be extraordinary, one of the most powerful among the gods. However, none of that mattered now. Judging by the accumulating daily base debt, she still owed a lot. When the time came, there was just one problem to consider: how to collect that debt. After all, having seen the power of the evil god's silhouette, he could roughly guess how terrifying the master of destruction would be upon her recovery. Screw it, we'll deal with that when the time comes. And moreover, Su Qi looked up at the scene before him, a madly twisting and deadly presence that had everyone screaming in fear, and made up his mind. he would have to be cautious about calling upon the evil godbrother's descent to save the day. Unless it was a dire situation where they were at the brink of total ruin, he would not easily call upon the evil godbrother again. After all, it could easily harm friends as well as enemies, and once unleashed, be impossible to control. "What are you doing?" Su Qi watched Nancy, who, at this moment with tears in his eyes, was looking down and holding his unconscious assistant tightly. In the previous life-or-death moment, he had not chosen to flee but to find his lady assistant. "Are you trying to stage a dramatic sacrifice of love?" Nancy didn't bother with Su Qi's teasing, but instead looked up with a frozen expression, only to find the surrounding force had not come crashing down, but stopped midair. Why did it suddenly stop? The next moment, the silhouette of the evil god suddenly let out a low growl, like a sound of friction, causing the entire night city to fall into various explosions, with many cyborgs and electronic devices going haywire with electric currents and sparks. Then, the silhouette of the evil god vanished on the spot, and the overwhelming presence it had been sensing, about to crush its face, vanished right before its eyes. The unintelligent silhouette, with only one thought, must catch up and kill, must tear it into a million pieces. This was the ultimate fate of that power. Nancy, stunned, watched as countless twisted forces and the black fog were sucked away like by a vacuum cleaner from above. The indiscernible silhouette and its terrifying oppressive force smashed open a crack, heading in a certain direction. What happened? Why did it suddenly leave? Maybe it had a house fire, and it was in a hurry to get back. "Nancy, I'm being serious. That would be young Master Yuhai, deciding to save everyone by acting as the lone bait, to lure away that being. Asking you is just my redundant stubbornness. Anyway, although I don't know why the other party suddenly withdrew." Nancy took a deep breath. "But we have managed to survive." At this moment, he looked at the Stars Hall, which was a complete mess. All electronic devices were dead, and the venue was full of unconscious people. Could be said, having gone through this, the auction had turned into a total catastrophe. And Su Qi, looking at the genuine atomic heart he had stored in his item slot, now in his possession, he had just deceived the enemy with a concrete illusion, which also proved the level of his spiritual power was far beyond 7th rank. Of course, not excluding the possibility that the enemy's mind was affected, the timing was critical, and it was not thoroughly probed among other factors. However, its escape came at a great cost, managing to leave despite various restrictions. The silhouette of the evil godbrother although immediately gave chase, but Su Qi thought it unlikely that the other party was dead. Firstly, because the power of the evil godbrother was limited, acting purely on instinct. Secondly, because he disguised the totem as the atomic heart, and not etched on its body, while the escape coordinates were locked. But it was no fool. If it destroyed the totem and could still use a second escape, it might also have a chance to shift. At this moment, young Master Ash was looking at the dissipating force, hair disheveled, eyes filled with fear and anger, not hesitating at all as a hidden powerful being appeared, opened a portal, and whisked him away. He could not stay any longer, not even delivering a harsh threat, for just a moment ago he truly feared for his life, and now was trembling in fear. Most of the Spirit Prince's descendants and influential forces were also making contact, wishing to leave this place of conflict. Lest danger rolled back in. And Xinghe did not leave like young Master Ash. Young Master! A powerful being covered in fish scales appeared beside him. "We should also leave this place of conflict immediately, not just because they feared the terrifying shadow would return, but also because there were many hidden powerhouses around they had not detected, likely from young Master Yohai's people, lurking in this place, clearly with ill intent, all of which filled them with shock, had it not been for the recent accident." Chapter 199. Everything was about to become extremely lethal. "Wait a moment. Don't hurry." And Xinghe shook his head. "I sent a message to my father 10 minutes ago. He should be on his way here." The strong performer's eyes trembled slightly. Lord Spirit King was actually coming personally. But it was also normal. Although everyone was called Young Master just like other people, and Xinghe was different. Other heirs of the Spirit King were numerous, based on clan operations, and the position of Young Master they held was more like that of a crown prince, where only the recognized heirs could sit in that position. As for Xinghe, he was the only son. After all, Sunset Spirit King's constitution was special. His reproduction ability was as low as some lottery draws, with a probability so low it was infuriating. And after Xinghe was born, Sunset Spirit King was ecstatic, waving the sky gold for all the protected worlds for 5 years, throwing a huge celebration, even invoking extraordinary traits to bring him all sorts of blessings. He was extremely fond and protective of him. But there was a considerable generation gap. Sunset Spirit King created a unique territory for Xinghe, provided various pollutants, interesting traits, and arranged for his own abnormality-strong performers to follow after him. But this was not what Xinghe wanted. For this journey to Anxious Land, he took action first and reported later, leaving in advance without notice. And Xinghe now stood next to Mixed Fish Piano, which was shaking and spouting blood water, having lost consciousness, but was still whole and protected. After all, this guy was a pollutant, unable to directly face the pollution of Dad. Evil God, help it recover. The scaly, strong performer reached out his hand, slowly pulling with spiritual energy. Mixed Fish Piano barely recovered. It seemed that it had not yet recovered from the purgatory of the old days, shakily, subconsciously squeezing out blood words. Sect Hierarch. And Xinghe's brow lifted slightly. Mixed Fish Piano suddenly shook all over, coming to its senses sharply, and hurriedly typed, with fawning symbols, Young Master. And the previous message. Mixed Fish Piano shuddered. And Xinghe watched the continuously emerging blood words, while his gaze shifted toward Su Qi in the distance. At this moment, Su Qi once again received a message from the Paradise System. Attention please, players. Anomalies have occurred in the instance. Checking the number of players still within the instance. 1. This message had popped up once before, when the Shadow of the Evil God descent happened, and at that time all players were forcefully sent out after seeing the terrifying shadow of the Evil God. But Su Qi was not among them, because he was the culprit directly connected to the shadow of the Evil God, and the transmission strength was firmly halted. Next came the descent of the Evil God's shadow. The system was unable to employ the power of Paradise to extricate him, until the other left. At this moment it seemed to detect that the anomaly had disappeared, and the message continued to pop up. Players are now able to prepare to transmit and leave at any time or wait for the celebration to end before leaving. Celebration. Su Qi looked over the Stars Hall, where numerous people were slumped over their seats, passed out, along with lots of rubble and exploded equipment. They all looked quite sound asleep. My first time at such a quiet celebration. Su Qi strode toward Simon, grabbed Simon's suit tie. Wake up! But Simon, like a husband passed out in an AV, fell into an immovable deep sleep. His sleep quality was too good. He was knocked out by a shock of spiritual power. At that moment, a voice slowly sounded. Su Qi turned to see it was young Master Sunset and Xinghe. The sinister power still lingers in his spirit. Shouting won't wake him. Only waiting for it to dissipate or using spiritual energy to purge it will work. I'll have one of my subordinates help you? And Xinghe prepared to call over one of his strong performers. No need, Su Qi said with a light smile. He just needs a little stimulus. Evil God's power was his power. Above Simon's head, a faint black fog slowly emerged and was quietly absorbed by Su Qi's pupils. He slapped Simon on the head. Simon, your wife and kids ran off with someone else. Simon shuddered all over, his eyes opening groggily. How could I possibly have a wife and kids? I'm nearly 40 and still single. That's fine. Keep it that way. President. Simon's eyes widened as he looked at Su Qi, then glanced around at the ruins, his eyelids bulging. What happened here? What's going on? He had passed out the moment the evil god appeared and was unaware of everything that happened afterward. After all, Simon was just an ordinary shop owner. Don't ask. If you do, it's just improv. Su Qi turned to Nxinghe. By the way, young masterin, how long does one usually stay unconscious with this kind of strange power? And Nxinghe paused, but it was a powerful figure next to him who spoke in a deep voice. If it's not removed, they'll stay unconscious for about 4 to 5 hours. Good. Su Qi handed his wristwatch to him. Take this for now, it contains everything I've prepared. While all the dignitaries of Night City are sound asleep, pull the rug from under them, burn bridges, commit arson. Simon? Anyways, you two just go and do it. Su Qi also woke up Sigong Chang, leaving behind the Super Dream Protocol subsystem and a series of arrangements in the wristwatch. And now everyone's sleep quality was quite good. And, under the power of the evil god, the whole of Night City was completely paralyzed. Timing, location, and harmony among people. Sigong Chang slowly came to. Upon seeing the situation before him and the subsystems and arrangements in the wristwatch, he took a deep breath, recognizing the great opportunity at hand. But, is doing this a bit? Sigong Chang hesitated, being the most conscientious among the many cutthroat dignitaries. Such thievery made his moral bottom line crumble. Oh! Su Qi looked at Simon. Do you have such burdens? Not at all, Simon said excitedly. I can hardly wait. Sigong Chang. Su Qi patted Sigong Chang on the shoulder. In this respect, you're clearly not as good as Simon. This is the kind of talent the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce needs. At the mention of the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce, Nxinghe paused slightly, admitting to himself that he knew quite a bit from Mixed Fish Piano. For example, the man before him was the sect hierarch of the Hustlers sect, the one who had inscribed messages on the Mixed Fish Piano. But the person seemed different from what he imagined. In the saga recounted by the Mixed Fish Piano, the sect hierarch of the Hustlers was a paragon of righteousness, bravery, and justice. After all, it was composed according to various epics where heroes were all embodiments of mercifulness, justice, knights, and other virtues. And now, Nxinghe felt that the other had a flexible moral bottom line, not at all the same demeanor. That, Nxinghe wanted to speak. Now that he finally met the man in person, his initial interest was piqued by the songs and the tale of the Mixed Fish Piano. Nxinghe was eager to interact with him, especially since, from the recent information from Mixed Fish Piano, this sect hierarch was not only arranging everything but seemed to have created an extraordinary stir. And if the descent event was orchestrated by him, then it was all the more remarkable. To Nxinghe, Su Qi now embodied a tinge of mystique. Respected young Master Sunset. However, Su Qi interrupted him, smiling. Would you consider investing? Nxinghe was startled. Investing? The Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce. It's the commercial guild under the Hustlers sect. Su Qi said, seeing the expressions of friendliness and interest atop Nxinghe's head. It seemed he could try to draw him in. Nxinghe's expression shifted. I am somewhat interested. Good. If you're thinking of investing. Su Qi looked at Nancy. Spokesperson. Come quick. Tell him about our services. Nancy trembled all over. Huh? Chapter 200, Massive Points. Shocking. Nancy silently assessed the shattered walls, the exploded equipment, resembling ruins of the Stars Hall, and the just gradually disappearing Su Buxian. She had misjudged the person. She had thought that Su Buxian invited her due to his wish to give her a chance to contact Nxinghe, young Master Sunset, just for an introduction. But now it seemed, it was obvious this guy was running out of time and had her take the hit. Damn it. Without knowing it, she had become the spokesperson for the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce. And she couldn't even deny it, after all. The honored young Master Sunset seemed interested in the spot where Su Buxian disappeared, lost in thought. Well, this is great. Now the pressure was on her. But what business does the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce even do? She had no idea. Why couldn't that guy have given her a draft before leaving? However, Nancy recalled Su Buxian smiling and pointing at his pocket before he disappeared. Could it be? Nancy quietly pulled out the business card, then found the tagline and a bunch of products in the inner layer. So this guy had already planned everything in advance? Following the normal procedure, she would likely be forced to recite these things. Respected young master, allow me, Nancy, to introduce the various services of the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce, Nancy said helplessly yet with a respectfully serious tone. And Xinghe, however, didn't mention this topic but gently said, he comes from paradise? A descender. Yes, paradise and descenders were hardly a secret among many beings. The power of paradise was like the extraordinary traits of the divine, allowing descenders to enter a world and leave quickly. This ability was not too miraculous to the many worlds, as many races or divine followers all possessed special abilities. The only notably unique trait was the infinite rebirths. But power that transcended life and death inevitably came with a terrible price. Do you know much about him? Nancy was stunned for a moment. Somewhat. I've met him once before. Then tell me about it. And Xinghe said with interest, I seem to have lost my taste for made-up tales. Mixed fish piano. Am I about to be unemployed? No, I'm just a piano. What unemployment? Moreover, if he is from paradise and possesses noteworthy abilities. And Xinghe's eyes flickered slightly, muttering to himself, it seems that anxious land will be encountered again. Player Su Buxian has left Fantasy Universe's instance world number 646863. The main quest is being judged. You have received 49,319 game coins, experience, and 2,131 spiritual ability points. Your current level restriction has been removed. Your level has been increased to level 25. Please note, points tally is in progress. Your current points are 103,912,839. Next entry to the ranking battle will be in 24 hours. Ranking battle evaluation. Please note, this is the player's first official contact with a non-independent instance world. The vast, boundless world is like the surface of an ocean, under the influence of countless swirling undercurrents. A wave that should rise at a certain moment is pushed aside due to your actions. But this massive wave will only be delayed. The endless vortexes will grow more intense, like a powder keg waiting to be ignited regardless of who pulls the trigger. Su Buxian looked at the slew of notifications popping up. He noticed that the level restrictions had been lifted. He had suddenly advanced to level 25. It appeared that he had indeed accumulated a lot of experience before, but it seemed that leveling up had indeed slowed down. And now he had gained 21 plus 22 plus 23 plus 24 plus 25 is equal to 115 attribute points. He could finally make some serious progress on his basic attributes. A player's strength, in fact, needs to be divided into many parts, among which basic attributes and sequence bonuses are particularly important. Both are very important. Basic attributes determine the foundation, sequence bonuses are the key to burst power. The larger the base number of basic attributes, the stronger the enhancement. In other words, the basic attributes are like body refinement. Only with sufficient attributes can spiritual energy burst. Of course, sequence is the most essential aspect. No matter the quantification of the data, it can't escape the process of ascension. Of course, spiritual power must be calculated separately. Now that he has increased so many basic attributes, his spiritual power has been greatly enhanced, completely illogically. Also, this ranking battle evaluation is quite interesting. It seems that young Master Dark Sea's attack was not as simple as it appeared. Su Qi could hardly not suspect that the other party was planning a major move. Of course, the other party here is definitely not just talking about the scapegoat or his father, the Yuhai Spirit King, as well as a host of forces associated with it. There seemed to be a lot of entanglement. Just hope Evil God gives a bit of strength to not let them pull through. In any case, what had to be done in Night City was done. What shouldn't be done, well, was also done. All in all, this instance is different from the previous standalone worlds. It has civilization, social structures, not completely overrun by horror, pollution, danger, and it maintains pulls and connections with various worlds. It really can be considered a good place for players to officially contact the new worldview. At this moment, another message popped up in front of Su Qi. Your ranking in the Fantasy Universe tournament area has changed. Based on your current points and ranking, you may draw ranking battle rewards. Since it is still the ranking battle period, many aspects are different from the end of the previous instances. Now the award draws, directly tied to the ranking and points,